Not much happens in dark, murky ocean depths. It's mostly pretty quiet, with some smaller fish carefully passing by and probably hoping nothing big would grab them on their way. There's also a bigger fella looking for plankton coming through every now and then. Suddenly, a giant beast comes out of nowhere. First, it's just a dark dot in the distance, until it gets closer. Oh, it's a great white shark. You can recognize its firm, dark gray body, white belly, and slanted head. These creatures have special cells in their skin called melanocytes that can make their color change to lighter or darker. This way, a shark can blend in with its surroundings, which is a nice ace up its sleeve and the reason why we barely even see one coming by. These predators can grow up to be more than 20 feet and weigh up to 5,000 pounds. Our fierce fella is just passing by looking for some lost fish that might wander around, if it gets lucky, directly into its mouth. But instead, a giant jagged tentacle comes out of nowhere. The great white barely escaped it, and quickly swam a little further to see what was happening. A giant squid comes out of the depths. Its eyes, as large as dinner plates, are looking straight at the shark, while its soft body is getting closer. A challenging prey, but hey, why not try? Most of the time, these creatures eat shrimp, fish, and other squid, but sometimes they like to really treat themselves, so they go after small whales. A shark will do too. I know you'd expect these creatures to be way smaller, or that's at least how I comfort myself when I swim a little further from the shore where my feet can't touch the bottom anymore. But they can weigh 600 pounds and be 40 feet long. The great white shark is the biggest predatory shark on our planet. Check out its long and sharp teeth. It definitely has the biggest smile down there in the ocean. Great whites have around 300 teeth, but they don't use most of them for biting. Instead, they have a special system where new teeth grow all the time because they need to replace the ones that get worn out or lost. And they have a really powerful bite, over 20 times stronger than ours. Considering all that, you might think a great white shark has nothing to be afraid of in the ocean. But looking at its gigantic enemy, we can't be so sure of that anymore. Octopuses only have 8 arms. Squids too, but they also have 2 additional tentacles. They're similar to their arms, but suckers on the arms go along most of their length, while tentacles have suckers only at the ends. This squid has probably hundreds or even thousands of suckers. There are squids without these suction cups, but in that case, they have rotating hooks, or a combination where these two work together. Hooks catch prey, and suckers stick on it so it doesn't get away. Squids have teeth too. Plus they have this special part called a radula. It's like a tongue, but with teeth on it. The teeth are tightly packed together and are difficult to remove. When food is passed to the radula, the teeth chew it into small pieces. This is important because squids have sensitive body parts near their throat, so they need pieces of their food to be very small. Their bite may not be as strong as the great white sharks, but it's still quite powerful. For instance, way stronger than a lion's. They also have glands that produce venom and use their beaks and radula to inject the venom into their prey or a creature that's coming after them. Wow, these squids are really equipped better than expected. And they're also way longer than the great white, which gives the squid more room to attack it with its long tentacles from a distance and seize it. Giant squids usually live at depths of 2,950 feet, while great whites prefer to stay at depths of about 650 feet. But we'll try to keep the competition fair. Let's say these two meet in a territory where water pressure won't hurt or bother any of these animals. The great white is circling around the squid. It moves a bit faster than the squid. Its swimming speed can reach 25 miles per hour when the animal is submerged, and it also has short bursts of speed when it can move at 35 miles per hour. Giant squids move at around 25 miles per hour. Just for comparison, an average human swims at 2 miles per hour. But with its length, the giant squid has more room to attack the great white shark with its long tentacles from a distance. They can stretch for 33 feet to snatch the prey. And look, it's really trying. But it ain't that easy. Not only is the great white big and fast, but it also has special sensors called the ampullae of Lorenzini. It's a good tool to detect prey and generally stay safe in the ocean. But the squid is definitely no joke. It has activated its special defense mechanism and released thick black ink. The great white is confused. The ink is like a smoke screen, which gives the squid enough time to get away. The shark can't see its opponent anymore. The squid is getting closer, and the poor great white has no idea from which direction. It's time for the final move. Even if the great white manages to catch the squid can detach parts of its body as a last resort to protect itself. It can lose up to 10 body parts, unlike sharks. These predators can't lose any essential body parts because they won't survive. And look, the squid finally latches onto the shark. Its suction cups and the sharp beak that can pierce its prey make it nearly impossible for the shark to escape. They both disappear into a cloud of ink, the great white shark in one of the rare fights it can lose, and the giant squid ready for new conquests across the ocean. Aren't giant squids perfect for scary stories? In legends, there are often battles between humans and sea monsters. In the past, Norwegian sailors shared stories about sea creatures they encountered during their ocean travels. Over time, these stories grew to include creatures that were like giant islands with arms. And let's not forget about the Kraken. It's a legendary sea monster from Scandinavian stories that looked like an island, which was how it would trick sailors. The spooky stories say the beast was using its long tentacles to grab ships and drag them to their doom. And do you remember Jules Verne's novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which describes an encounter between a ship and a giant squid? In real life, giant squids don't eat humans, and they're not particularly interested in going after ships. However, not all the stories about these creatures attacking ships are made up. There are some reports. For example, in the 1930s, something attacked a Norwegian tanker, the Brunswick, 3 times. And yes, it was indeed the work of a giant squid. Fortunately, the squid couldn't grip onto the ship's steel hull, so it ended up getting caught in the propellers. But even though everything was okay in the end, just looking at this gigantic monster trying to take your ship down to the bottom must have been terrifying. We can laugh at stories about the Kraken until we're out there on our own. In 2003, a giant squid came closer to a French yacht that was participating in a sailing race. It couldn't cause any harm, so it eventually gave up. So, for now, the idea of a giant squid taking down a ship or boat remains a fictional story, although they're certainly capable of trying. Okay, giant squids are big, but there's another creature from their family of cephalopods that can be even larger. It's called the colossal squid, and one that was found weighed 992 pounds, hundreds of pounds more than the giant squid, 606 pounds. And they can stretch their tentacles for up to 45 feet.
Okay, get this. Dolphins can phone each other. This is not a joke, but a fact confirmed by scientists. They put a mother and a baby dolphin in 2 separate aquariums and conducted special underwater audio communication between them. When the connection was turned on and the dolphins heard each other's voices, they started chatting. Their conversation consisted of happy whistles, chirps, and clicks. You've probably heard this chatter in wildlife movies. But I wonder, how do the dolphins dial the phones? Do they have flip phones? Get it? Flipper using a flip phone? Okay, never mind. Anyway, The most interesting thing about this experiment is that the mother and the baby recognized each other's voices through the speakers without seeing each other. They were talking fast, like it was a normal dolphin phone conversation. Think of a dog that hears its owner's voice from a phone speaker, or when you turn on a video of another barking dog. Your pet is confused and doesn't understand what's going on. But dolphins started communicating immediately, just like humans. Many animals communicate with one another through touching, gestures, biting, or growling. But dolphins have shown they can communicate without direct contact. If they understand clacking, clicking, and whistling, it means only one thing. Dolphins have their own complex, developed language, and scientists hope to learn it. Scientists called one of the elements of their language signature whistles. They use whistles to call others by name, to convey information, and to warn of danger. This is one of the most difficult forms of communication in the animal world. These whistles vary depending on the situation and the dolphin species. They raise or lower the tone, shorten the duration of the sound, or increase it by exchanging short or long words. To compare the language of dolphins with other species, scientists have compiled a table of sound properties such as length, clarity, pitch, pattern, and others. According to all the data, dolphins have the largest sound palette. Larks, the bird, took second place, by the way. But even with all this data, we still don't know much about the complexity and diversity of their language. In one of the latest studies on this topic, scientists analyze about 1,000 dolphin communication recordings made over the past 40 years. But even after that, we can't even come close to understanding it. It's possible that AI will handle this better than humans. We aren't aware of how to speak using signature whistles, but scientists know for sure that dolphins use them to express their emotional state, to share news, and to tell each other about the dangers or where their prey swims. Scientists believe that dolphins can talk about anything. They can rejoice and complain to each other. They even communicate in different styles at the same time, like people who are chatting at a noisy party. But in addition to sound signals, they use body postures, jaw claps, bubble blowing, and fin stroking. They form groups, assign tasks, and work as a team. If one dolphin knows a place with food, it will tell its friends about that, like Instagram. If they spot a shark, they'll warn others about it. There was even a case where 2 bottlenose dolphins scared a spotted dolphin. A couple of days later, this dolphin returned to that place with its friends. It's like when some bad guy bullies you, and then you call your friends to help deal with him. What if we learn dolphins' language and find out that they're smarter than humans? What if they gossip about the human race and laugh at
"Oh, brother, get a load of these dumb people. They're fighting each other over nothing. What do they spend their lives on? Why don't they just chill and enjoy life? They create too many problems for themselves. It's a good thing we're smarter than them and can just relax in the ocean. Yeah, dude, let's stay away from them."
Or maybe they know a lot more about nature and the ocean than people do. What if they discuss the problems of the ocean and have unknown technologies? Of course, these are all theories, but just imagine how cool it would be if you could understand dolphins and respond to them using a special program. You could get yourself a good friend that's interesting to talk to and can take you for a ride in the waves. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's still very unlikely. Dolphins are too fast swimmers. It's difficult to constantly record their communication using high-tech equipment. Even the slightest change in the dolphin's whistling is associated with their actions. Their whistles may sound the same, but the context is different. They play, fight with one another, chase fish, or run away from a large shark, and all the time, they use their language. Well, we have the same situation. We raise our hands when we want to say hello, but we also raise them when saying goodbye. Our wow reaction can mean both joy and horror, depending on the context. Dolphins have the same complex communication. For example, they clap their jaws when they fight each other, but they also do it when they play. Dolphins are unique not only because of their brains and the way they communicate. Perhaps you don't know that dolphins are not fish, they're mammals. Yeah, you knew that. They can't breathe underwater because they don't have gills. They come to the surface, take a deep breath, and swim for about 10 minutes. Then they repeat this process. Unlike fish, dolphins don't lay eggs. They give birth to cubs, and they feed them with milk. They also have body hair. Yep, newborn dolphins have hair on their beaks. They lose it soon after birth. Why do they need this hair? Scientists believe that this is an evolutionary echo from the time when dolphins lived on land. And here's another strange fact. We've all heard how millions of years ago, fish began to slowly come ashore. During evolution, they changed their appearance, adapting to new life on solid ground, and so they gradually turned into mammals. But dolphins are unique since their development is kind of reversed. They were originally amphibians that lived near bodies of water. The ancestors of those amphibians were artiodactyl mammals, similar to deer. Not only dolphins, but also whales and porpoises have the same evolutionary path. All of them are called cetaceans. They made a big step from land to water about 50 million years ago. What if these ancient deer-like animals were the most intelligent creatures on Earth that realized that living in the water was much better than living on land, and they haven't regretted that decision yet? Dolphins have a big brain. Chimpanzees and humans have brains of the same size, and they all have something in common. Dolphins have a long lifespan, and they form groups. They show the emotions of sadness, grief, happiness, and joy. They can assess situations and solve problems. But the coolest thing is they can pass the mirror test. That means they recognize their reflection in the mirror. They don't just look at themselves. No, they pay attention to the parts of their bodies that they can't see otherwise. They examine their movements in the mirror. Their behavior in front of a mirror is not much different than that of humans. This indicates their self-awareness and high intelligence. Do they feel sad if they don't like their body? Can they be happy if they have, let's say, a beautiful tail? In addition to these features, dolphins have a real superpower, echolocation. By producing clicks and whistles, they can find their relatives that are pretty far away. They can spot prey or an enemy despite poor visibility in the ocean. This power allows them to sense a metal implant in the body of a swimming person. We are 70% water. Therefore, when we dive into the sea or ocean, for dolphins, we become part of their echolocation field. When they emit a sound, the sound waves crash into a metal object inside the human body, and the dolphins immediately feel it. And some dolphin species can turn off half their brain while sleeping. One eye is kept closed, and the other eye monitors the situation so as not to miss danger. Ooh, smarty pants dolphins. So, a mysterious discovery was made deep in the Red Sea, the so-called death pools. Woo, that's scary. In 2020, researchers embarked on a dive into the Red Sea. The mission spot was in the Gulf of Aqaba, between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Near the end of their expedition, as they ventured deeper into the darkening waters, they noticed some strange seaweed floating above the seafloor. They decided to use a remotely operated vehicle and investigate it. Suddenly, they discovered these strange, motionless lakes of water within the sea. These are called brine pools. They're basically pockets of salty water deep on the ocean floor. And when I say salty, I mean it. Sometimes they're up to 8 times saltier than the ocean water itself. Mysteriously, they don't mix well with the surroundings. They formed millions of years ago, sometime during the Miocene epoch, back when weird creatures roamed the earth, like me, and deeply buried mineral deposits dissolved into the water. The largest pool spans about 170,000 square feet. Meanwhile, 3 smaller ones are under 107 square feet each. At first, this discovery didn't seem that scary. But here's why they're so horrifying. Not only are they disgustingly salty, they also lack oxygen. Now hold on a sec, isn't that normal for something that's underwater? Well, it turns out the Earth's waters are full of oxygen, and at least half of this element on our planet comes from the oceans. Just like plants on land, marine plants such as phytoplankton, seaweed, and algae munch on sunlight and produce oxygen through photosynthesis. They release lots of it into the surroundings. Marine life then eats half of it, so only about a quarter of the oxygen that we breathe actually comes from the oceans. Just like us, sea creatures need this element to survive. Without it, they can't breathe and support their metabolism to live. That's why these pools are super dangerous for most of them. It's like a puddle of thick syrup for bugs. When they get in, the poor things immediately suffocate and pass away. which is why the pools are surrounded by a graveyard of marine animals. But let's see how these things can exist in the first place. Have you ever tried making ice cubes from salty water? Spoiler, it's pretty hard. When you add salt, the water gets harder than usual to freeze, a phenomenon that has a funny name, freezing point depression. Oh, that's because salt interferes with the hydrogen bonds between water molecules. As it finally freezes, stuff like particles, dirt, or dissolved salts get pushed out to the sides. As a result, the salt's kind of squeezed out of the ice crystals and gets trapped near the edges in small bubbles or pockets. Something similar happens in the ocean when seawater starts freezing under super cold polar caps. The salt doesn't freeze with the water. Instead, it gets pushed out, forming a super salty cold liquid, the brine. And then it sinks down to the ocean floor. On a large scale, all this process also helps currents to form. Despite being so dangerous, the pools are still full of microbial life because microbes couldn't care less, they'll survive anywhere. There are literally thick mats of them in the brines. There are also some salt-loving creatures, like shrimps and eels, hovering around the pool's edges. They're being super creepy, waiting to catch unsuspecting prey that ventures too close to the toxic death pool. Ew. Well, it sounds icky, I know. But this discovery gives us some fascinating insights into how life might have originated on Earth. We already know from the evolution theory that we came from the ocean, but now scientists think that life might have begun in the deep sea in some super dark, oxygen-free places. These brine pools are like time capsules. They're one of the closest things we've found to the early Earth. They can tell us the planet's history of earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, and more. For example, they have some traces of rainfall that happened over 1,000 years ago. And they can also help us search for life on other water-rich planets. For example, Mars most likely used to have huge oceans on it. Now, NASA scientists want to send a special instrument called HABIT for a special red planet mission to study things similar to our brine pools. This will tell us more about how life appears and survives in the universe. There is lots of unexplored fascinating stuff like this in the Red Sea. That's why scientists conducted the so-called Decade Expedition and spent around 5 months exploring the place. This expedition was launched by the National Center for Wildlife. They made so many remarkable discoveries that now we've got 77 new research papers. For example, they found over 10 blue holes, incredible underwater sinkholes that host unique ecosystems. They also learned that dolphins can use those blue holes to protect their young from predators. Scientists also found traces of great white sharks, a creepy community of deep-sea lanternfish living in low oxygen conditions, and even a new coral species. It's the most resilient deep-sea corals that also vibe just fine without oxygen, like microbes we mentioned. Speaking of which, research also showed us some new ancient thermal vents and large blobs of microbial formations near Farasand Island. Now, can you believe that with all that, we only explored 5% of the ocean? It's divided into several layers based on depth. Each layer becomes darker and more isolated from sunlight as we go deeper. The places that no sunlight can reach are terrifying. Now, the fun, cute layer with dolphins and turtles is called the epipelagic or sunlight zone. It's so tiny, but even this layer is about 650 feet deep. Then we have the mesopelagic or twilight zone. It's the layer of mysterious octopus, shark, and other loners which extend to about 3,000 feet down. And then the horrors begin after this one. We encounter the bathypelagic or midnight zone. It extends to 13,000 feet below the surface, about a half of Everest above you. Here we have the famous poor blobfish, squids, and anglerfish. Below it is the abyssal zone. It extends to about 20,000 feet deep. Since there's not much sunlight or oxygen, as we mentioned, most creatures here are quite small, like tube worms and shrimp. The darkness continues until we arrive at the scariest place of the planet, the place full of trenches formed by tectonic plate movements, the Hadal Zone. It's named after Hades, the deity of the underworld in Greek mythology. Just like Hades' realm is dark, remote, and guarded, the Hadal Zone is the deepest and most depressing part of the ocean. It starts at depths of around 20,000 feet and can go down to 36,000 feet and more. The famous Mariana Trench also belongs to this zone. Only 3 people in history have ever explored these depths in person, making it one of the least explored and most mysterious places on our planet. However, despite crazy high pressure, near freezing temperatures, and complete darkness, there are still things who manage to survive here. Guys like amphipods, which are critters who feed on dead material sinking from above, and the Hadal snailfish, which lives as deep as 27,000 feet. So scientists used to assume that if there's no sunlight, there wouldn't be that much oxygen around. But one day, a research team decided to measure the levels of oxygen in one of those deep zones. Surprisingly, the levels were super high. They checked the equipment thinking that it was malfunctioning, but nope, all the sensors showed the same thing. Turns out the oxygen was somehow generated by rocks. These small potato-sized rocks on the seafloor are called polymetallic nodules. They're rich in metals like copper, nickel, and cobalt, and they're basically like small batteries. When you put a battery in salt water, it can produce bubbles of gas, a process called electrolysis. In the same way, these rocks create tiny electric currents, which are powerful enough to produce the same gases, splitting water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. It's the first time we saw oxygen being produced by some non-living minerals. This is what scientists now call dark oxygen. It turned out that about half of large marine species, or megafauna, were living just on dark oxygen alone. All these discoveries are reshaping our understanding of where and how life could evolve. It means that we might be able to find life on other planets or satellites with low oxygen conditions, like Enceladus and Europa, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and they have large bodies of frozen water on them. Wow!
It was 1905. A 13-year-old boy named Ben Sands grabs his lantern and slips into the Craighead Caverns in Sweetwater, Tennessee, a place he already knew like the back of his hand. But that day felt different. He was in the mood for a little more adventure, so he left the main trail behind and went deeper into the shadows. That's when our brave teen decided to squeeze into a narrow, muddy tunnel, barely as wide as a bicycle tire. He crawled for what felt like forever. Then, after about 40 feet, he finally popped out the other side and couldn't believe what was happening. He had water up to his knees. Yep, he was standing in the middle of a massive underground lake. The chamber was so huge, the light from his lantern barely reached the walls. Then, he had a great idea. He started tossing mud balls into the darkness as far as he could, just to test the ground ahead. All he heard in return was splash, splash, splash. It was all water. What Ben had discovered would later be named the Lost Sea, which is considered America's largest underground lake. It's also the second largest non-glacial subterranean lake in the world. The only one bigger is Dragon's Breath Cave, hidden on private land in Namibia. The underground lake in Craighead Caverns is so massive and mysterious, we haven't fully explored it. Thanks to top-notch equipment, divers have discovered more than 13 acres of water-filled rooms beneath the surface. But the visible part of the Lost Sea stretches only about 4 acres. One time, a brave diver entered one of the submerged chambers with a sonar device in hand. This kind of equipment works by sending out sound pulses underwater. When those sound waves hit something, they bounce back. Then, the device measures how long it takes for the echo to return and calculates how far away the object is. So, he was confident he could map the whole thing using sonar. But he also played it safe. He hugged the wall the entire time, the only way to make sure he'd find his way back. As he took surroundings in every direction, the results came back the same. Nothing but more water. To this day, no one has found the end of the lake, but they're not done yet. Each expedition reveals new chambers, new tunnels, and new mysteries. The funny part is, Craighead Caverns was already a well-known spot long before Ben stumbled across the long sea. And over the years, this cave has had some pretty unusual and kinda eccentric uses. The first people we know who used the cave were the Cherokee. The upper chamber served as a meeting place for their councils, and we know that because a wide range of Native American artifacts, including pottery, arrowheads, and jewelry, have been found in one of the rooms. Then, between 1939 and 1940, the cavern was turned into a mushroom farm. A few years later, in 1947, someone decided to build a wooden floor right inside the cave. That's when the underground nightclub known as the Cavern Tavern was born. And here's another fun fact. One of the cave's earliest visitors wasn't a person at all. It was a giant jaguar. It made its way deep into the cave about 20,000 years ago and apparently got lost in the darkness. It wandered for days before falling into a crevice far from any light. Some of its bones were found in 1939, and today they're on display at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. But I suppose nothing that's ever happened in the cave quite compares to what lies deeper inside. If you're feeling brave enough to explore its depths, you can actually take a boat tour across its underwater lake. That's right, there are excursion boats inside the cave, all powered by electric motors. It is probably a dark, cold, and strangely peaceful journey. And just below the boat, you will see some big rainbow trout swimming around. They weren't always there. People actually brought them in and released them into the underground lake. And according to visitors, the guides explained that it was all part of a bigger plan. They wanted to see if the fish would find an exit and reveal a hidden tunnel to another body of water. But the fish stayed put. So now, visitors have something else to look at during the ride. And since there's no natural food in the cave, the trout have to be fed by hand every single day. Guides also mentioned that one of the most fascinating features of the caverns isn't the lake or the trout. It's a crystalline structure known as anthodites, also called cave flowers. These are fragile, spiky clusters, and they are rare. Really rare. Now, here is a question. If Ben Sands discovered a lost sea out of nowhere, does that mean we could still find something similar? Well, yes. There are probably still many underground bodies of water hidden around the world. In 2016, for example, a massive reservoir of water was discovered deep beneath the Uturuncu volcano located in the Andes. But it's not like a calm, friendly lake. The water is dissolved into partially molten rock, so it's stunningly hot. We're talking about a temperature close to 1,830 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, in 2021, scientists found a huge thermal lake inside a cave in southern Albania. And in 2024, they returned to the same spot with more advanced measurement equipment. They found that the lake measures 454 feet long and 138 feet wide. That pretty much confirmed it is the biggest hidden lake of its kind we know about. Also, in 2024, a group of workers from a travel agency was exploring Tung Cave in Vietnam when they suddenly came across a mysterious lake, hidden way down in a part of the cave that hardly anyone ever sees. Its water reflects a transparent emerald or greenish color, making it look unbelievably beautiful. This spot will probably be open to tourism very soon. Alright, finding hidden lakes inside caves or beneath volcanoes is one thing, but finding a hidden ocean inside the Earth, that is a whole different story. And believe it or not, it actually happened not long ago. But you can't swim in its waters, for two big reasons. First, it's hidden about 400 miles underground. And second, the water isn't in liquid form like a normal sea. Instead, it's trapped inside solid rocks. Sounds strange, but let me explain. Back in 2014, researchers found deep pockets of magma located around 400 miles beneath North America. And that's a pretty strong sign there's water down there. But how? Down there, scientists discovered a mineral called ringwoodite, which only forms under extremely high pressure, the kind you would find deep within the Earth's mantle. And inside the structure of ringwoodite, they found water, not in puddles or pools, but trapped inside the mineral itself. Ringwoodite acts like a sponge, holding water within its crystal structure. And when scientists ran the numbers, they realized something staggering. The amount of water trapped in this mineral could be 3 times greater than all the oceans on Earth combined. And that is huge. Not just in size, but the actual discovery is huge, because it might confirm a theory that's been around for decades: that a massive reservoir of water exists deep beneath Earth's crust. Geologists believe this deep reservoir plays a key role in Earth's water cycle. It might be responsible for volcanic activity, the movement of tectonic plates, and even how water first appeared on the planet's surface. Instead of arriving on comets or asteroids, Earth's water might have always been here, slowly seeping out over billions of years from deep underground.
So imagine stumbling upon a creature so huge it could dwarf even the largest known marine animals today. Scientists discovered the fossils of this beast on England's coast and believe it once ruled the waves. The new species was named Ichthyotitan severnensis, but thankfully for me, scientists nicknamed it the Little Stock Monster. Its estimated lengths range from 72 to 85 feet long, almost as big as a blue whale. Megalodon can't even compare to this. It was only about 60 feet long. And what's crazy is that this fossil we found wasn't even an adult, so who knows what their actual size was. The first piece of the Little Stock Monster was discovered in 2016 in the Westbury Formation. Researchers found a 3-foot-long jaw part that belonged to an unknown species. For years, this single fragment had been driving them crazy because they had no idea what that animal was. Then, in 2020, a miracle happened, of sorts. A father with his 11-year-old daughter found the second piece of fossil on a beach. This discovery led to more findings. Finally, in 2022, the last piece of the literal jaw puzzle was found, buried along the Somerset coast. This leviathan belonged to the Shastasaurid family. Both the Little Stock Monster and other Shastasaurids had one ancestor, so all the species in this family are super similar to each other. For example, all of them were the largest marine reptiles ever to exist. Although our Little Stock Monster is much larger, most Shastasaurids could grow up to only 69 feet long, and it's possible that the Little Stock Monster, when fully grown, would reach up to 100 feet or even more. Both of their bodies were just perfect for cruising the ancient seas. These marine titans were elegant and slender, with an elongated snout. Other marine animals at the time were smaller and looked more like dolphins. Shastasaurids had long paddle-like limbs adapted for efficient swimming. Their skulls show large eye sockets, which means they had excellent vision. If you were in the ocean, no matter what time it was or where you were hiding, they could spot you. They were also incredibly fast and could dive to great depths. Of course, all these things made them the most terrifying predators. They ate pretty much everything, including fish and squid, and you if you were there. They probably captured their prey like whales, opened their huge mouths, and literally sucked the fish in. What made the Little Stock Monster especially scary is that it wins in the jaw competition. For other Shastasaurids, their jaws were a bit weaker, so they hunted smaller fish, kind of like today's orcas. They required vast amounts of food. This shows us that the Earth's Triassic oceans had rich, productive food webs. But the Little Stock Monster has this unique feature. It could open its jaw almost 90 degrees upwards. It also had tons of powerful muscles around. Its jaws were horrifyingly strong. So while others were hunting some squids, the Little Stock Monster probably hunted large fish and even other marine reptiles. Fossils of Shastasaurids have been found everywhere in the world, from North America to Asia. This means that these creatures dominated and terrorized the oceans for millions of years, although even they weren't completely safe from scavengers. And that's exactly why we struggle to find these fossils now. Scavengers didn't leave any remnants of them. So, while we have some fossils of this marine family, they mostly remain a mystery for us. They lived in the oceans about 200 million years ago, in the late Triassic period. The Earth looked completely different back then. All continents were united in one Pangaea, a huge landmass. Some parts of this supercontinent were covered with lush conifer forests, while others were dry deserts and open prairies. It was before the famous Jurassic period, but there were already first pterosaurs and amphibians. It seems like those monsters were crazy resilient. The Triassic period was super unstable, but they survived through many changes in the environment. Well, until the last one. The Triassic extinction came out of nowhere. It was one of the Earth's Big Five extinction events. It wiped out almost all species on the planet, including these leviathans. It's still not clear what happened exactly, but it looks like there was a huge tectonic activity. Volcanoes in the oceans were going crazy back then. These massive volcanic eruptions have probably altered the climate and ocean chemistry, leading to the extinction of many species. Scientists have a theory that it might have happened because there was a rain of comets flying to our planet from the Oort cloud. This likely happens about every 200 million years or so. I wasn't around then, so I'm just guessing here. In any case, after the extinction, the Earth took some time to recover. Then it entered the famous Jurassic period. More terrifying sea monsters were on the way. One of them left us a colossal skull. This fossil is 150 million years old, and it also belonged to a sea beast from Jurassic times. They called it the Sea Rex. The name is very fitting. This monster could have broken a car in half with one bite. It was also discovered accidentally. A fossil enthusiast was walking along the Jurassic coast. This place is famous for having tons of ancient fossils, all because of the erosion in stormy weather. Typically, people find small spiral fossils here. However, this time, he discovered a giant sea monster fossil. Excited, he contacted scientists. They arrived at the spot right away and then had to carefully climb down a cliff to search for the rest of the skull. This fragment alone is 6.5 feet long. Turns out it's a newly discovered species of pliosaurs, giant predators of the ancient seas. Pliosaurs were among the largest marine predators ever. Some of them grew up to 40 feet long. They used their huge teeth to snatch and devour prey, including other reptiles. Well, at least those creatures are far gone. But what about the horrors that still live in our oceans? Recently, biologists discovered the world's longest animal, the one that's still alive to this day. They found it off Australia's coast, on the Gascoyne coast, a very mysterious and unexplored place. There, underwater vehicles stumbled upon a frightening 150-foot-long siphonophore. That's twice as long as many blue whales and 3 times as long as a humpback whale. Doesn't it kind of look like one of those toy string worms? But this creature isn't friendly at all. It's a string-like deep-sea predator. What's even more scary is that this isn't actually one creature. It's a colony of small clones working together as one. Basically, collective consciousness. Ooh, Borg. Together, they stretch out like a single long string in the water. This creature might be the longest siphonophore ever found, and it was discovered at a depth of around 2,000 feet. Siphonophores, similar to jellyfish, capture their prey by dangling stinging tentacles in the water. When their tentacles touch small crustaceans and fish, they get paralyzed, and then they're reeled up to the colony's body. Expeditions to Western Australia's underwater canyons were definitely worth it. Together with that siphonophore, scientists have discovered up to 30 potential new marine species. Among them were a new octopus or squid, a long-tailed sea cucumber, glass sponges, and giant hyroids, colonies of animals resembling upside-down jellyfish. None of them have been seen before in Australia. But most of them weren't as scary as the one that was recently discovered in the Gulf of Mexico. This creature is straight out of a sci-fi thriller, a 26-foot-long mangapinna squid or bigfin squid. It was discovered near an offshore oil rig at a depth of more than 7,800 feet. It has incredibly long elastic tentacles, which can be 15 to 20 times longer than its body. It holds them at right angles to its body, making it look even creepier, almost as if it has elbows. And yes, it's another deep-sea predator. These 10 tentacles probably help the squid trap their prey and drag it onto the seafloor. We barely know anything about this extraterrestrial-looking creature because they're very hard to find and study. And if you think their tentacles are awful, just check out these creatures with 20 arms. This thing looks like a facehugger. This new species is lurking in the frozen depths of Antarctica. Experts were searching for cryptic sea animals known as Promachocrinis, or Antarctic feather stars. They're kind of similar to starfish and sea cucumbers, but have an otherworldly appearance and can live up to 6,500 feet below the surface. It's called the Antarctic strawberry feather star. Despite its pretty name, its appearance is anything but cute. It has a bizarre strawberry-like body, from which 20 spindly arms branch off. Its coloring ranges from purple to dark reddish, and the arms all have different lengths and thickness. Who knows how many more of such scary creatures we'll discover in the future?
Hold your breath, we're going to the seabed. What do we have here? A lot of fish, octopuses, coral reefs, perfect circles of unknown origin, shrimps, stingrays, sharks. Wait, what? Hold on. What are those perfect circles on the seabed? Wow! Perfectly symmetrical, 67 feet in diameter, with a clear outline. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20. There are so many of them. 1,300 strange rings at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. What are they doing there? How did they appear? Try to guess. Traces of an extraterrestrial civilization? The remains of an ancient city? A new kind of sea creature? There's a 99% chance you won't be able to give the correct answer. But here's a little hint. There's a connection between these circles and the Ice Age. It seems that the mystery has become even more complicated, but let's find the answer together. So it all started in 2011. Marine biologists discovered mysterious circles at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, and the first question that arose was why no one had noticed them before, given the vast territory these circles occupied. The fact is that a big part of the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea is too shallow and close to the shore. And for this reason, no one is engaged in mining there. At the same time, the bottom is too deep for scuba divers. Thus, the circles were in some kind of blind spot. Let's move on. The circles are approximately the same size with a clear outline and perfect symmetry. But the strangest thing is that there's a dark spot in the center of each of them. Visually, it looks like a fried egg with a yolk in the middle. In 2013, biologists discussed the discovery at a scientific conference and made assumptions about the nature of these circles. Perhaps they were connected to underwater volcanoes that left such strange marks after the eruption. Perhaps it was a strange geological formation. But why are they so perfectly round? It doesn't look like they appeared by accident. Okay, let's move on. Is it possible that it's coralline algae growing in weird shapes? You can guess as much as you'd like, but scientists needed to go down to the bottom and study the rings up close. So they did. In the center of the ring was a large protrusion formed by red calcareous algae. This ledge was several feet high and wide, and there were swaying fan-shaped growths at its top. The strange ledge was surrounded by some kind of pale scree that looked like debris. The black ring itself consisted of rhodoliths, accumulations of hard, rocky algae. Scientists realized that those weren't just circles. They seemed to be alive. Okay, more questions appeared. Let's say it's some kind of strange algae. But why form these circles? What made them this way? Scientists took samples of the material from the center of the circles and found out that they were about 21,000 years old. At that time, large-scale events were taking place. They changed the appearance of Earth and the fate of all creatures living on it. 21,000 years ago was the peak of the last ice age. The Mediterranean Sea was much smaller and colder than it is now, and the seabed on which the mysterious rings appeared was closer to the surface. Now it's dark here, but at that time, this place was illuminated by sunlight passing through the water. Scientists also discovered several caves with layers of sedimentary rocks near the circles. In the past, these caves were located above the coastline and were washed by waves, resulting in erosion and the appearance of these empty gaps. Now they're completely underwater. Okay, what does this give us? The cold sea was not too deep during the Ice Age. What's next? Next, the scientists found out the nature of these strange ledges in the middle of the rings. At first glance, they looked very similar to corals, but in fact, they were sediments formed by coralline algae. These photosynthetic organisms created a skeleton of calcium carbonate, and the reason they did it there is that it was a warm place with access to sunlight. In the beginning, these algae were thriving. They expanded outward and formed something similar to domes or large pancakes. Then the Ice Age began to end. The weather became warmer, The water gradually heated up and giant continental glaciers began to melt. A huge amount of melted ice flowed into the Mediterranean Sea. Its level rose, the bottom became deeper, and there was less and less light. The beautiful algae slowly plunged into darkness. Their domes collapsed and left behind those little ledges in the center and pieces of calcium carbonate scattered around. For thousands of years, there was nothing around those algae remains. But where did the big circles come from? After the melting of glaciers, the Mediterranean sea level stabilized about 8,000 years ago. The algae grew new layers in the form of small ledges, those swaying fan-shaped growths. This organism began to develop the pieces of calcium carbonate, and then small pieces began to roll down the ledges. They rolled in different directions, forming those perfect circles. At the moment, this version is the most realistic. Scientists say they have no direct evidence that the mysterious circles appear this way, but they also have no reason to believe that this version is incorrect. If any of you were hoping that someone or something had deliberately drawn these circles, don't get upset. There are other mysterious circles on the seabed, and this time they were created for an important purpose by one amazing creature. In 1995, divers noticed beautiful circles with a geometric pattern right on the sandy bottom of the shores of Japan. It looked like someone had drawn them on the sand. The circles weren't ancient because otherwise the water would have swept the patterns away. Indeed, soon those drawings were erased, but then new ones appeared. Nobody knew what was going on. Was someone drawing stuff to tease divers? But it turned out to be much cooler. The patterns were supposed to attract females, and this someone who drew them was a small, white-spotted pufferfish. The males of these fish flap their fins on the seabed, swim in different directions, and thus draw amazing patterned circles. They have no art education, and they probably can't think abstractly, but they really want to start a family. These fish are about 5 inches long, but their artworks are about 7 feet in diameter. These little artists try their best, but what happens afterward? The female swims in, looks at the pattern, and gives her score. If she likes the pattern, she's ready to start a family. If she doesn't like the drawing, she dashes away and leaves the poor pufferfish with a broken heart. Nothing much is known about the drawings. Scientists can't get into the fish's brain and find the answers. All we can do is observe. And during long observations, scientists noticed some curious things. Around the center, there are perfectly aligned gaps and patterns. The fish not only draws outlines on the seabed, but also decorates them with fragments of shells. That is, the male tries very hard, like an artist working on their painting. The fish creates this masterpiece within 7 to 9 days. After that, undercurrents wash it away, and the fish has to rebuild it if the female doesn't like this work. But if the female chooses the male, they become a couple. The female lays eggs in the center of these circles. Then she swims away, and the male stays with the eggs for 6 days to protect and care for their offspring. The behavior of these fish is similar to that of bowerbirds, birds that build small huts out of twigs and leave and decorate them with colorful berries and flowers. And all this in order to attract a mate to create offspring.
Now imagine a creature with a body that is reminiscent of a cuttlefish, with eyes sticking out from stalks like a funky headband, fins on its tail, and a long skinny nose ending in a mouth full of teeth. Or maybe this thing could be a claw. Yep, the Tully monster is on the move. It's definitely one of those freaky creatures you wouldn't like to face while scuba diving somewhere. Luckily, it went extinct 300 million years ago. This unusual marine beast was discovered in the 1950s in Illinois, and scientists couldn't even agree what it really was. Some thought it was a vertebrate, which means a group of creatures with a spine, like us humans. But a team of researchers in Japan studied many fossils of the Tully monster, using advanced laser scanning technology to check them in detail in 3 dimensions. There's still a lot they don't know about the Tully monster, but they managed to realize it didn't have any spine at all. Now the next step was to see what type of invertebrate it was. Could it be vertebrate-like, such as a landslide? Or are we talking about something closer to snails and worms? They also discovered the creature had segmentation in the head area that extended from its body, and that's not something bony creatures have. Still, in recent years, some researchers had the idea the Tully beastie could be related to jawless fish, such as lampreys. These fellows belong to the most ancient group of vertebrates, and are not pleasant to see either. In the case of lampreys, we're not talking about extinct animals. They're still out there somewhere, wandering the ocean and scaring other animals, or you, if you see it in the northern and western parts of the Atlantic Ocean where they live. And they've been here really long, even before the dinosaurs. A long time ago, long before humans or I even existed, there were eurypterids, weird creatures from a group we call arthropods, which includes spiders, insects, and crabs. But eurypterids were unlike anything you've ever seen before. They had a body shape similar to horseshoe crabs, with many segments that made up their body. Instead of legs, they had special appendages at the front that acted like oars. Some even call them giant scorpions, but most eurypterids were actually quite small, except for this special one, which was truly enormous. It could grow to a staggering length of about 8 feet. Wow! The next time you see a crab scuttling along the beach or a spider swimming its web, remember, we're lucky we only got mild versions of their ancient relatives, which, by the way, disappeared hundreds of millions of years ago. Whew. Now, some eurypterids were pretty fierce and fast predators. They would swiftly swim after their prey, chasing them down in the water. Others were more like scavengers, living on the bottom and feeding on whatever they could find along the way. They had a taste for the leftovers, like some sort of cleanup crew of the ancient oceans. Eurypterids love to spend their time in brackish water environments. It's water with more salinity than fresh water, but still less than seawater. Now imagine you're just floating around and all of a sudden you see this guy. No, it's not some weird tiny spaceship, and you won't see it floating in space, even though that's where it would perfectly fit in, as some weird creature from another planet you'd see in sci-fi movies. You'd actually see it floating in the sea because we're talking about a really small animal with enormous eyes called Dilophosaurus. Each of its eye bulbs was about a quarter of its whole body length. That's what gives it that space look, like it might live on one of the oceans under the surface where we look for life, like Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, or Titan, Saturn's biggest moon. I could easily imagine creatures like Dilophosaurus giving us a warm welcome once we get to Mars, too. Dilophosaurus had great vision. It would keep a keen eye out for any movement in its surroundings. Once it noticed something, it would swiftly launch its spiky appendages forward. At first, these things looked like tools for fixing stuff, but Dilophosaurus actually used them to capture smaller arthropods. The unusual thing is that even though it had such great eyesight, Dilophosaurus still spent most of its time catching prey in brighter waters near the surface. And yet, scientists found its fossils in the rock layers that are more often associated with darker environments, where animals such as deep-sea crinoids and vampire squids reside today. It's confusing. But one of the explanations for this says it's possible these deep-sea creatures actually lived in shallower waters in the past and later ended up in the depths as the geography of our planet changed over time. No one knew what Dilophosaurus really was. It could belong to a group of arthropods, and it seems to me that's where most of the world's weirdest creatures are. Some believe it could be related to mantis shrimp, while others compare it to blind, worm-like crustaceans that live in dark underwater caves. And check out this enormous worm lurking beneath the sandy ocean floor, patiently waiting for its next meal to swim by. These ancient creatures were like stealthy predators, perfectly camouflaged in their sandy lairs. And now, 20 million years later, scientists have found the remains of their hidden hideaways. The burrow they discovered, shaped like the letter L, was found preserved in ancient sediment on the seafloor of Taiwan. It was around 7 feet long and only an inch wide. That's where the ancestors of modern bobbit worms lived. Bobbit worms have been around for a long time. They can grow to be a few inches to a whopping 10 feet long. A pretty weird creature dominated the skies at the end of the dinosaur age in North America. We know it as Quetzalcoatlus, and it soared above famous dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops, showing them who the ultimate ruler of the skies was. Quetzalcoatlus belonged to a group of flying reptiles called pterosaurs. They were some of the biggest flying animals ever known to exist. When you think of Quetzalcoatlus, imagine an animal as tall as a giraffe. These incredible creatures had long necks, small bodies, long legs, and wings that were relatively short compared to their size. The biggest of its kind was really massive and held the title of being the largest flying creature of all time. They had long, pointed skulls, while some also had short crests at the back of their heads. And for a long time, researchers were confused about how these giant pterosaurs hunted for food. At first, some even believed that Quetzalcoatlus and its relatives were like giant vultures that scavenged the remains they would find around. They drew such a conclusion because Quetzalcoatlus fossils were found inland, away from the coast where other big pterosaurs were found, such as the crested pteranodon. Plus, many thought these fellas were skilled at skimming, which means lurking over freshwater systems and catching fish. But it appears these massive animals were actually predators with excellent hunting skills. The exact technique they used to catch their prey remains a mystery, though. Now here's another cool discovery, a specific fossil as the oldest evidence of muscle tissue ever found. This fossil belongs to a group of animals that includes modern creatures such as jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones. And it looks so cool and unique, right? It has bundles of fibers arranged in a four-fold symmetrical pattern, similar to what we see in Nedardians today. This arrangement is different from any other fossil from that period. Now this fossil may look weird, but it helps us understand the evolution of muscle tissue in animals. They, well, all of us actually, got new options for discovering different feeding strategies and generally new things to do thanks to muscles. And it's not like scientists usually get to study fossilized muscles. It's more that they learn about that based on how animals feed, reproduce, move, and do other things. So this cool fossil suggests animals may have had an earlier origin than we used to believe.
There's a creature somewhere deep in the ocean looking for prey that would make Dracula himself proud. It's been around since before even the dinosaurs walked the earth. It has no bones or jaw, but it doesn't stop this underwater vampire from hunting. The name of this eel-like parasite is the Pacific lamprey. The English monarch loved this fish so much that he defied doctors' orders to stop eating lamprey flesh. He got sick every time he'd have the original gooey fish. But the lack of bones and the fact that this lamprey tastes like slow-cooked beefsteak made the royal fall in love with the fish once and for all. The product of this love was a chill in his aged body, some heavy sweating, and some other scary symptoms, which eventually took his life and interrupted his 35-year reign. The lamprey is way better at surviving, as it lived through at least 4 mass extinctions. Its ancient ancestors evolved over 450 million years ago. There are around 40 living species of lampreys still thriving across the world. The Pacific lamprey is just one of them. These creatures have cartilage instead of bones, and a third eye, which is a special light-sensing organ on the top of their heads. Instead of a regular jaw, they have a sucker mouth surrounded by teeth. It's perfect for latching onto prey and sipping up body fluids like underwater vampires. Once they pick a victim, they suction it, making a seal that's almost impossible to break. Scientists believe the Pacific lampreys don't munch on flesh. Female lampreys lay up to 200,000 eggs in nests that stay in fresh water for 3 to 4 weeks. Once the larvae hatch, they burrow into sediment and stay under the sand for up to a decade. When they hit their teenage years, These miniature Draculas re-emerge and migrate from freshwater all the way to the Pacific Ocean. This journey isn't the easiest, and it takes some changes to its appearance and physiology to adapt to a huge change in salinity. After several years, they go back to freshwater to reproduce. Pacific lampreys can use chemical clues released by their larval migrating pals to find their way. They can travel hundreds of miles inland to find the perfect spot for spawning and rearing. It's not always the same place they spawned in. Many species of birds, mammals, and other fish can appreciate the fatty flesh of lamprey. This makes them some of the most valuable players in freshwater and marine ecosystems. Another lamprey type, the sea lamprey, is native to the Atlantic Ocean. It's not that dangerous when it's at home, but once it gets to the Great Lakes, it becomes a real threat to the 4 local native species of lamprey. The sea lamprey is up to 4 times bigger than the lake species. It has unlimited food and spawning grounds, and no natural predators here, so it becomes cocky. It secretes an enzyme that doesn't let the blood clot. Once it attaches to some unsuspecting fish, it spends the next several months feeding off of it. And even if the fish shakes the lamprey off, it doesn't have long to live because the mark the predator leaves behind. Sea lampreys aren't interested in humans, but can accidentally latch onto a swimmer. It won't be fatal, but it's not the most pleasant sensation, and you need to get the spot of the impact disinfected. The Australian box jellyfish looks harmless, but it's considered the most venomous marine animal. Unlike other kinds of jellyfish that float with the current rather than swim, this creature can reach an impressive speed and choose its own direction. It has tentacles covered with tiny darts loaded with poison. People and animals that get unlucky enough to meet with those tentacles face some scary and sometimes even fatal consequences in a matter of minutes. Before you decide to never revisit the ocean, you should know that only a few out of around 50 existing species of box jellyfish have venom that is lethal to humans. There are some not-so-dangerous species living in warm coastal waters worldwide. And the most dangerous ones are in the Indo-Pacific region and northern Australia. A blue-ringed octopus spots a signature psychedelic color and the ability to take away your life. This cute-looking sea monster likes to spend its time in the soft, sandy bottom or shallow tide pools and coral reefs. It normally hides in underwater crevices, among shells or debris. If you disturb it, the octopus will activate its tiny color-changing organs and demonstrate its blue rings as a warning signal. The next step will be releasing a venom 1,000 times more powerful than cyanide. This venom is more toxic than that of land mammals. The octopus normally uses it to hunt crabs, shrimp, and small fish by pecking them with its beak and paralyzing them. There is no known antidote for the venom, so if you ever see this sea creature, the best you can do is to stay away from it. It bites without any pain, so you might notice when it's too late. The good news is that it's not aggressive and won't go after you unless it's cornered. The reef stonefish are masters of disguise in the underwater world that camouflage themselves on rocks, coral reefs, or just blend into the seabed. They thrive throughout tropical marine waters of the Indo-Pacific. Their invisibility superpower makes them especially dangerous to their prospective victims they ambush and swallow whole. If someone happens to disturb them, their 13 defensive dorsal spines stand on end and deliver a powerful venom punch. They say stonefish stings are extra painful and lead to scary consequences within minutes. They're called the most venomous fish in the world. If you don't do anything about it, the impact can be lethal. If you ever go diving in the Pacific Ocean, be careful not to pick up a cone snail from the seafloor. It has a beautiful shell made of brown, black, or white patterns. Like most other snails, it's slow, but it has a complicated system of seeking out prey. It likes to snack on fish, marine worms, or even other snails. Once a cone snail senses food is near, it activates a sharp proboscis, or a needle-like protrusion from its mouth. The attack is swift and super potent. The victim doesn't even have time to realize what happened to them. Once it's completely incapable of moving, the cone snail swallows it whole. Humans aren't on its menu, but it can still release the venom if someone steps on it or disturbs it. The proboscis can even penetrate gloves. Luckily, only several out of over 700 species of cone snails can take a human's life. But since there's no antivenom, you better not risk it. All 52 known species of sea snakes living mostly in the warm tropical waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans are venomous. The beaked sea snake even has the title of one of the world's most venomous serpents, but it's one of the few kinds that can pose a real threat to humans. Sea snakes prefer a peaceful coexistence and would rather slither away than engage in any confrontations. If you ever see them in the water, staying calm and moving slowly will save your life. Sea snake bites, although almost painless at the moment, can have varying degrees of impact. Some may only cause mild symptoms, while others can lead to severe outcomes. Most bite reports come from accidental encounters, like someone freeing them from nets or unsuspecting beachgoers stepping on them. Blue dragons rarely grow larger than the size of a grape. They like to swim belly up, so their brightest blues blend in with the ocean waters. And the silver front faces down and camouflages with the darker seabed. Blue dragons feed on another dangerous sea creature and store up their stinging cells. Their venom lives on even after the fish itself is no longer alive. That's why you should be extra careful and never pick up or step on them on the beach.
Well, hey there! We dive back in time and into the oceans over 500 million years ago, just, because we can. Whoa! Watch out! It's not megalodon or giant sea reptiles you need to look out for here. It's a bizarre, unearthly-looking creature called Anomalocaris. The name means unlike any other shrimp, and I think you'll agree, it looks like a nightmarish cross between a shrimp and a modern-day centipede. 2 tentacles protruding from its face, each lined with razor-sharp teeth. Oh yeah, and this thing was about the size of your leg. With a wave-like movement of the flaps on each side of its body, it was graceful for a terrifying creature. It was also more advanced than any other life on this planet at the time. Especially those huge eyes. You have only one lens in each of yours. This giant shrimp had 16,000. That's 4 times more than a common housefly. And you know how good their vision is. Good enough to dodge that swatter every time. All this allowed Annie to become one of the first animals on this planet to feed on others. Yep, here it is. Earth's first hunter. Its favorite meal? Trilobites. Hey, try a bite. Those are the ancient ancestors of crabs. Some of their fossils have marks on them in the same shape as the monster shrimp's mouthparts. Terrors of the past like this got to be so giant thanks to more oxygen in the atmosphere. A perfect example of this, Meganeuropsis. Imagine a dragonfly. Now make it as big as a cat, and with a wingspan longer than your arm. Megan, the monster-sized dragonfly, could easily grab other insects or even small animals, and she ruled the air with quick movements. Back then, there were still no large birds or other airborne enemies for this behemoth bug, so it was safe and free to grow as large as this planet would allow. Piranhas of the past were also jumbo-sized. Mega piranha was about 3 times the size of the river terrors we have today. Its bite force was about the same as a tiger's, and those striped kitties bite down 2 times harder than lions. That means it probably not only dined on other fish and any land creatures that, got too close to the water, but it could also easily crunch down on large turtles and other unlucky shelled creatures. And fun fact, modern-day piranhas bark like dogs when they're about to enter a confrontation. It actually sounds more like a frog's ribbit. But makes you wonder, what did this mega-sized ancient cousin sound like? A bear roaring? How about giant sea scorpions the size of your bed? Go back about 460 million years and you'd see them swimming under you. And watch out for that tail. Scientists still don't know if these creatures could use it to inject venom like your standard land scorpion. But something tells me I wouldn't want that thing anywhere near me. Then there's this guy, Therizinosaurus. Terry looks sort of like a goose with long arms. Oh, and did I mention this goose dino is about 2 stories tall and longer than a bus? Yow! Its arms make the T-Rexes look even more bite-sized, each 8 feet long, almost triple the length of T-Rexes. And on the end, razor-sharp claws the size of your whole arm. Now, don't worry about those lengthy claws too much, though. Terry probably used them to cut through giant termite nests. So, this huge reptilian goose was more interested in eating bugs and plants. Another mega monster for you, Megatherium. The giant ground sloth could look a giraffe straight in the eye and weighed as much as a hippo. It moved mainly on its hind legs and used its massive tail as support. He had huge paws with colossal knife-sized claws. The sloth could use them to defend itself from enemies and to bend tree branches in search of food. But the biggest danger to the giant ground sloth wasn't dinosaurs or saber-toothed tigers. It was our own species. Yep, humans showed up just in time to meet this fellow and to, eat him up. Titanoboa was a terrifying 50-foot snake, as long as the great megalodon itself. It was also more than 2 times heavier than the heavyweight champion among snakes today, the green anaconda. Crocodiles were a regular on this serpent's menu. Titanoboa could swim 3 times faster than the fastest Olympic swimmer our species has ever seen. It was quicker and more dangerous in the water than outside it. And don't forget the boa part of its name. This massive snake wasn't venomous. Instead, it liked to squeeze. Remember that giant shrimp from earlier? Well, Opabenia looks like its teeny-tiny finger-sized cousin. And instead of 2 toothy tentacles, this thing had a vacuum hose coming out of its face. On the end of that trunk, what looks like a single crab claw. Add 5 eyes and a mouth under its head, and you've got a recipe for something not of this planet. Only it is. This creature used its trunk like an elephant does. Its claw grabbed food from the bottom of the ocean and brought it up to its mouth. This thing is so weird-looking that, apparently, when the scientist who discovered it presented his findings to an audience, they all laughed as if he were joking. Now, a real-life monster, the Tully monster. From a distance, it looks a bit like Nessie, that long neck and teeth-lined jaws. But get closer, and you'll see it's more like a long nose with a mouth attached at the end, like a mosquito. Its eyes are further back, sticking out of tubes all snail-like. Tully was an ancient mollusk, about the size of your forearm. It probably dined on jellyfish and shrimp 300 million years ago. Thylacus smilus will put a smile on your face as long as you don't get too close. No, it's not a relative of the saber-toothed tiger. It was a marsupial, making it more related to a kangaroo than anything. And if you compare them to body size, its fangs were actually longer than a saber-toothed tiger's. And they grew continuously. As for that beard on its chin, that's actually all chin. The lower jawbone grew down to a point under the mouth. Those fangs were rooted to the skull, going way back to its eyes. When the mouth was closed, that bony beard protected the long, sharp teeth from breakage. Staganapolis, not to be confused with Minneapolis, might look like a big crocodile with a squished-in snout, but it was mostly harmless. Its small head and very few teeth meant the reptile didn't have much to work with when protecting itself. That's what all those armored scales were for, and no need for huge fangs or long rows of razor-sharp teeth when you're a plant eater. That beak-like tip on its nose allowed the stag to dig up plants. So, really, this reptile was more like a 10-foot scaly pig than a croc. Basilosaurus was a type of ancient whale that lived on our planet about 45 million years ago. Not quite as long as a blue whale, but this guy was still big enough to munch down on other whales and even sharks. Some people believe these monsters could still exist today. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen a giant sea dragon, and Basilosaurus fits the description. Plus, 90% of our oceans are unexplored. There's plenty of space to hide a sea monster. But scientists haven't found any fossils of this ancient whale younger than 3.7 million years. So, this myth is busted. Stegosaurus is one of the most recognizable dinosaurs that ever lived. It can easily be distinguished by those huge spikes on its tail and the bony plates on its back. It was twice as long as a giraffe and nearly 5 times heavier. But compared to its body size, it had the world's smallest brain. It was no larger than a dog's. Pelagornis had the largest wingspan of any bird ever discovered. It was twice the size of the largest bird today, the wandering albatross. Such huge wings made it hard for the bird to take off. It could only do so by jumping off cliffs. And when it finally spread its wings, this giant could only go about 40 miles per hour. The fastest bird today can reach speeds 5 times that.
You know how they say it's better to just hand over your wallet if you run into a mugger? Instead of surrendering their wallets, sea cucumbers choose to spit out some of their insides to fend off predators like crabs and fish. It's a natural defense mechanism for them, and they quickly grow those organs back in just a few days, thanks to special cells inside their bodies. It's not the only weird thing sea cucumbers do. They can actually breathe through their rear end. They have this thing called a respiratory tree that connects to their backside and sits right next to their intestines. So when they suck in water from their behind, it goes into that respiratory tree, letting them absorb oxygen directly into their fluids. Plus, sea cucumbers are the janitors of the ocean. They munch on whatever gets stuck in the sand on the ocean floor. Once they've eaten, they manage to clean out the sand, leaving it nice and tidy after they do their business. As for the clean sand, the stunning white sand beaches in Hawaii are actually a product of parrotfish number 2. These fish munch on algae from rocks and dead corals, and while they're chomping away, they also grind up the leftover bits of coral in their bellies. When they're done, they move their bowels, and voila! It all comes out as beautiful sand. Not only do they play a vital role in keeping the coral reef ecosystem healthy, but they can churn out hundreds of pounds of this white sand every year. Marine animals are seriously impressive when it comes to holding their breath. Just look at sperm whales and elephant seals. They can stay underwater for a mind-blowing 2 hours. Then there's a Cuvier's beaked whale, which holds the crazy record at almost 4 hours underwater. When you compare that to the human record of 24 minutes and 37 seconds held by pro diver Budimir Shobat, it seems pretty insignificant. But what's the marine animal's secret that helps them excel humans this much? Unlike us, these sea creatures have a ton of hemoglobin and myoglobin in their blood and muscles, allowing them to store way more oxygen. When their oxygen runs low, myoglobin steps up and releases even more. Plus, they can tolerate higher levels of CO2, so they don't feel the need to breathe as quickly. There's even a study that found their myoglobin molecules have a unique charge that keeps them from sticking together, which boosts oxygen storage. And on top of all that, they can slow down their heart rate and restrict blood flow to hang out underwater even longer. Rumor has it that about 540 million years ago, a meteor loaded with frozen octopus eggs smashed into Earth. Sounds like a delirium, but some scientists are entertaining a very questionable idea that octopuses and their cephalopod buddies, like squids and cuttlefish, might actually have some extraterrestrial origins. The thing is, cephalopods have extraordinary DNA that doesn't look like any other DNA on our planet. They've got around 33,000 protein-coding genes in their genome, which is way more than what we humans have. A recent study suggests that their evolutionary story shows some odd traits that might hint at a connection to space, like they could be from some super far-off past, or even the future. The researchers went as far as to claim that modern octopuses could be the descendants of these frozen creatures that hitched a ride on comets and splashed down in our oceans. And why octopuses? Well, they really stand out in the animal kingdom. They can use different tools to build their own houses, and they can even solve everyday problems independently of their brain, as 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are in its arms. These traits seem to have just appeared out of nowhere during evolution. They even tossed around another quirky theory. What if an extraterrestrial virus crashed into early squid populations and gave them a crazy boost in evolution, turning them into the octopuses we know today? Anyways, these are just fun speculations without any hard proof. Now, this funky object is an animal, not a rock. It's called sand dollar. Just look at the shape of its shell. Once sand dollars are exposed to the sun, their shells lose their soft, spiny covering and become bleached white. Back in the day, beachcombers thought these shells looked a lot like big silver coins, kind of like the old Spanish dollar that was about the same size. But if you prefer, you can call them sand cakes instead. These quirky creatures have tiny spines on their surface, and they glide along the ocean floor. They use small tube feet that line the grooves on their underside to grab bits of food like plankton and algae, which they then send to their mouths. Inside, they have 5 triangular teeth that help them munch on their meals. In some Georgia folklore, sand dollars are said to represent coins lost by mermaids. Sand dollars have a unique talent for cloning themselves. They can do this for a bunch of reasons, like when a predator comes around. Some species of sand dollar larvae can actually split in half as a defense mechanism. It takes about 24 hours for them to clone themselves, and the new larvae end up being about 2/3 smaller than the original, which helps them hide from danger. Wait, is that a giant sea hot dog racing through the ocean? Sorta. Some scientists have joked that sperm whales seriously resemble enormous hot dogs. These massive creatures can take quick naps, standing up for about 10 to 15 minutes. They only sleep about 7% of the time, mostly between 6 p.m. and midnight. Sperm whales also have a cool ability to retract and extend their eyes, thanks to a thick retractor muscle around them, but they can't actually roll their eyes in their sockets. Plus, they have the most asymmetrical skull of any mammal out there. Oh, and let's not forget, they have the largest brain of any living creature, weighing in at over 9 pounds. Unlike us humans, if dolphins went into full-on snooze, they'd stop breathing and could drown. So they figured out a genius solution. They let only one side of their brain sleep at a time. This means one half stays awake to keep them breathing and watching out for any potential threats. When they snooze, they only close one eye. If their right brain is resting, their left eye is shut, and vice versa. This unique sleep style is called unihemispheric sleep, and it lets them recharge without ever fully losing awareness. On top of that, dolphins might be using corals and sponges like their own little pharmacies. Scientists have seen them rubbing their bodies against specific types of coral and sponges, suggesting they might be treating skin issues. They've even spotted dolphins lining up to take turns at these spots, using corals like Gorgonian coral Rumphella aggregata, leather coral, and some sponges. What's really fascinating is that researchers have analyzed these corals and found they contain compounds that could help with dolphin skin conditions, which can sometimes lead to infections and lesions. Now, the big question is figuring out exactly how each type of coral helps dolphins, and if it really boosts their health overall. Sea urchins aren't exactly the Usain Bolts of the ocean. They move slowly by crawling with their tube feet and occasionally give themselves a little push with their spines. These little guys have just 5 teeth, which they use like a beak to scrape algae off rocks, which I'm pretty sure is the ocean's version of an all-you-can-eat buffet. But since all that scraping wears their teeth down, they're in a never-ending dental replacement program. Scallops are the underwater equivalent of the world's most confused security cameras, sporting up to 200 tiny eyes on their shells. These eyes are high-tech. They can even adjust their pupils to light. Instead of working like ours, scallop eyes have a unique setup. Light goes through a pupil, lens, 2 retinas, and then hits a mirror made of guanine crystals that reflects it back. Scientists were puzzled about how they see since their main retina often gets blurry light. But it turns out, scallops can change their pupil size by about 50%. Just don't expect them to do it in a hurry, as it takes a few minutes.
Now here's something really neat about orcas. They're expert hunters, and they do it in groups called pods. A pod can consist of up to 40 orcas, forming a very effective hunting team. Interestingly, there are distinct types of pods: resident and transient. Resident pods are more into fish, while transient pods have a taste for marine mammals. But no matter what type of pod they belong to, all orcas have one thing in common. They are master collaborators. They work together using smart hunting techniques that are often compared to the teamwork of wolf packs. Almost 95% of jellyfish's body is made of water. For comparison, the human body is 60% water. It's probably not a surprise since jellyfish don't have a heart, blood, eyes, or brain. The other 5% of their body weight is proteins, muscles, and nerve cells. Jellyfish have been around for more than 500 million years. This makes them older than dinosaurs. These creatures haven't changed much, and today's jellyfish are pretty much like their ancestors. Electric eels have small eyes that are not so effective in environments with no light, so they mostly rely on their electric organs. Those consist of 6,000 cells. Eels use them to stow power, similar to batteries. These creatures use electricity like bats use their radars or dolphins their sonar. An eel can also produce enough electricity to power a panel of light bulbs. There's a small tropical archer fish that can learn to recognize human faces. This fish has an interesting ability to spit small jets of water from its mouth. Researchers showed the fish the image of two different faces placed side by side. One was unknown and the other was familiar. The fish was supposed to spit water at the familiar one. The creature took the right guess more than 80% of the time. There's such a thing as a sea unicorn. That's an animal called the narwhal. Its horn is actually a tooth that can grow up to 10 feet long. Manatees, also known as sea cows, are distant relatives of elephants. Their weight can go up to 1,000 pounds. These creatures are vegetarian and need to eat around 10% of their total weight on a daily basis. That's lots of sea salad. In some cases, manatees share space with alligators, but they get along pretty well. You can even find a photo from Florida where an alligator rides a manatee's back. Frogfish have special fins that help these creatures walk along the sand. They're very useful in shallow waters. A ghost pipefish is hard to see, but once you spot it, you're bound to get really surprised. Its head makes up over 40% of its body. Crabs don't feel like wasting time on such formalities as putting foods in their mouth. That's why they taste it with their feet, which is where their taste buds are. Marine iguanas are the only lizards on our planet that like spending time in the ocean, even though they mainly live on land. They're herbivores that feed in shallow waters and swim like snakes. Iguanas use their long claws to hold on to the bottom when they need to graze. Green turtles can cross over 1,400 miles when migrating. They try to find the perfect spot to lay their eggs. Penguins sort of fly when they're underwater, reaching a speed of 25 miles per hour. More than 5 million years ago, I've heard, I wasn't around then, deep-sea worms and humans had a common ancestor. So we still share 70% of our genes with these creatures, and with sea stars, squid, and octopuses. Now, octopuses are in fact incredibly old. The oldest known fossil belongs to an animal that lived almost 300 million years ago. FYI, this is before our dinosaur buddies roamed the Earth. Wait, there's more! Octopus arms have a mind of their own. That's because 2/3 of their neurons lie in their arms, not in their heads. This means that their arms can problem solve how to open a shellfish, while their owner is worried about other stuff entirely. Talk about ninja-level multitasking. Oh, and like other animals, such as chimpanzees and dolphins, octopuses have proven to be good at maneuvering tools, like picking up old shells and using them as a temporary home. Now, of course, the most intelligent animals on our planet are humans, according to humans. But we don't seem to give pigs enough credit. Pigs are so smart they can play video games. No, not Minecraft. But in a recent academic study, scientists had 4 pigs play a joystick game. They had to manipulate the stick so that the moving ball would hit the wall and then they would get a treat. All 4 pigs did great in the test, which was surprising even to the scientists. Now, pigeons also aced an impressive test. They were trained to differentiate a Picasso painting from a Monet one, which they had no trouble learning. Then they were able to apply this knowledge, identifying works of art they had not previously seen. meaning they really understood the difference between each painter. Poor things are always seen as a nuisance. Now, if we placed kangaroos in an Animal's Most Amazing Ability contest, they'd win. It's mainly because they break the four-legged rule. A special species of kangaroo, the red kangaroo, uses its tail to help propel it forward. Now, visually, it has 4 limbs, but in practice, it uses 5. They're biologically built to use their tail as a 5th limb, since it's packed with articulated vertebrae and thick muscles. Of course, it had to be an Australian animal. Deep within the Sahara Desert, you'll find a little creature known as the fennec fox. This huge-eared animal adapted perfectly to survive in its hostile environment. The huge ears help them to dissipate the unbearable heat of the desert, as well as help them to hunt for underground prey. Now meet this guy. Unlike what its name might suggest, the red panda is closer to a raccoon than it is to a giant panda. You'll find a lot of these cat-sized creatures in the Himalayan region, hopping from tree to tree and bundled together trying to keep warm in the harsh weather. They're gentle and friendly like their big panda cousins, and occasionally enjoy eating some bamboo sticks. And then there are bees. Compared to humans, bees' brains are the size of pinheads, yet they are capable of astounding things. Let's say a bee is running low on energy after a long search flight. This bee desperately needs a drop of honey in order to continue flying, but smartly enough, she doesn't need to go back to the hive to recharge. She can ask a fellow beehive mate for a drop of honey directly from this other bee's stomach and continue flying. This type of decentralized system allows them to build highly effective societies, one that bees don't need to push the queues in front of the honey cells, for example. Every year in the winter, great white sharks that live along the California coastline disappear. It feels as if they take a vacation for 30 to 40 days. The animals go to a point halfway between Hawaii and Mexico. They might do it to get some food, relax, or hang out with their buddies from other areas. The spot is now called the Whale Shark Cafe. Some types of sharks, like makos, whale sharks, or white sharks, breathe in a very specific way. It requires them to swim all the time. They also need to move quickly and with their mouth open. This way, the oxygen can enter and reach their gills. Sea sponges are some of the most primitive animals. They're immobile, don't have a mouth, eyes, bones, brain, heart, lungs, or any other organ whatsoever. And still, they're alive. There's such a thing as a sea unicorn. That's an animal called the narwhal. Its horn is actually a tooth that can grow up to 10 feet long. Manatees, also known as sea cows, are distant relatives of elephants. Their weight can go up to 1,000 pounds. These creatures are vegetarian and need to eat around 10% of their total weight on a daily basis. That's lots of sea salad. In some cases, manatees share space with alligators, but they get along pretty well. You can even find a photo from Florida where an alligator rides a manatee's back. Frogfish have special fins that help these creatures walk along the sand. They're very useful in shallow waters. A ghost pipefish is hard to see, but once you spot it, you're bound to get really surprised. Its head makes up over 40% of its body. Crabs don't feel like wasting time on such formalities as putting foods in their mouth. That's why they taste it with their feet, which is where their taste buds are. Marine iguanas are the only lizards on our planet that like spending time in the ocean, even though they mainly live on land. They're herbivores that feed in shallow waters and swim like snakes. There's something known as the orange cat behavior, and apparently it's not just a meme. So far, scientists have been able to understand that coat color is connected to a feline's gender. And since orange is an X chromosome, orange cats are usually males, like Garfield. The so-called orange cat behavior describes ginger cats as agents of chaos. Again, pretty much like Garfield. However, there haven't been any conclusive studies on whether coat color and cat behavior are truly linked. In terms of vision, mantis shrimps probably have the most psychedelic vision out of all animals. These funny-looking creatures have a whopping 16 varieties of photoreceptors, with 5 of them reserved for the ultraviolet or UV spectrum. Ultraviolet rays are really short wavelengths, which are invisible to humans. The thing science still doesn't understand is how exactly these mantis shrimp view the world around them. Sure, they can perceive a bunch of colors, but they can't necessarily distinguish all of these colors among themselves. It can be that they just see a lot of really vivid, really blurry colors, but we haven't figured out a way to check that out. Now, to say sloths are cute is an understatement. They may be one of the friendliest animals in the jungle, but there's more. If you look closely at their fur coat, you'll notice hints of green. These greeneries are actually tiny little algae that grow alongside sloths. They help sloths to camouflage better in the jungle, but they also nurture them. The little cracks inside a sloth's fur create the perfect environment for algae reproduction, and scientists have found species of algae that don't exist anywhere else in the world. They do get by with a little help from their friends. Deep within the Sahara Desert, you'll find a little creature known as the fennec fox. This huge-eared animal adapted perfectly to survive in its hostile environment. The huge ears help them to dissipate the unbearable heat of the desert, as well as help them to hunt for underground prey.
Thanks to sci-fi, we usually imagine extraterrestrials as smart beings with huge heads walking on two legs. But if life really exists out there, it could look like, well, anything. From an upside-down nightmare to a weird water creature looking like it was drawn by a toddler. But we don't need to travel across the universe, just back in time. Because a long time ago, Earth already had a creature like that. This is the story of the Tully monster, one of the most bizarre creatures that scientists still can't explain. Around 310 million years ago, Earth was a drastically different place. Today, our continents are scattered like pieces of a broken plate, but back then, during the Carboniferous period, the planet had one supercontinent, Pangaea. That was more than 200 million years before a T-Rex was chasing down a Triceratops. Huge areas were covered in warm, shallow seas and swampy coastlines, with thicker air and higher oxygen levels. Oceans were filled with creatures that never made it past evolution's experimental phase, like this little guy. At one point, the area that's now Illinois was just shallow coastal waters and muddy shores. Sediment from rivers often buried marine creatures, and sometimes trapped them in iron-rich nodules before they could rot away. That's how soft-bodied animals, which usually don't leave fossils, were preserved in detail at a spot known as Mason Creek. Every single Tully monster fossil we know of comes from this one place. It's entirely possible that these strange creatures were swimming all over the prehistoric world. But this could be the only graveyard that had the needed chemistry to preserve their bodies until we found them. But wait, what exactly is this thing? Well, first off, it was named after Francis Tully, the Illinois fossil collector who first found it and brought it to scientists. And second, it wasn't a monster, that's for sure. The animal was pretty small, usually only about 3 to 14 inches long. It had a soft, swimming torso shaped like a thick worm or a slug without any hard shells or bones. But its front end was both the coolest and the weirdest part. It had a long, flexible nozzle sticking out of its face, almost like a vacuum hose, except at the end of that hose was something resembling a claw. The snout itself wasn't rigid, it could extend and bend, similar to how an elephant uses its trunk, or how an octopus reaches with an arm. So instead of biting prey directly, it probably reached out with its face tentacle, grabbed a snack, and pulled it in. Its eyes were another weird, one-of-a-kind feature. They were positioned on a stiff horizontal bar extending from its head, with one eye at each end. This setup gave it a wild field of view, similar to how a periscope or side-mounted cameras can help you see more. Most animals fall into two groups, vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates have a backbone like fish, dinosaurs, dogs, and us, humans. Invertebrates don't, like worms, snails, and insects. The Tully monster is one of the rare cases where scientists still argue what it was. When scientists look at the fossils, they see a pale stripe running down the middle of the body. One group says that's just a gut line, which would put the Tully monster in the squishy invertebrate camp, meaning it was a weird swimming slug. But another group claims that it was a notochord, a kind of primitive stiffening rod that evolves into a spine. If they're right, that would make the creature a vertebrate, a distant cousin of fish and even us. Basically, all of this makes the Tully monster a mix of a fish, a worm, and a crab, something never found since. Based on that soft, squishy body and little stabilizer fins, we know the Tully monster wasn't exactly racing other fish. It wasn't fast like a shark. It was more of a slow-motion cruiser. It probably drifted through the water using that long snout to poke around in the mud for jellyfish, sea cucumbers, or maybe even some rotting stuff. Despite its scary-looking claw and eyes, we can't tell for sure if it was a predator. The Tully monster was pretty well adjusted, so we don't know why it went away. If we look at the fossil record, this creature had disappeared way before the massive extinction events wiped out the dinosaurs or the earlier marine life. There wasn't an asteroid or a volcano involved. Perhaps it vanished because its home wasn't the same anymore. Remember, the Carboniferous period was a wet, swampy world. But as time went on, Earth's climate shifted. Tropical estuaries dried up and the chemistry of the water changed. This probably caused Tully's specific playground to disappear. As far as we know, the monster left no genetic heir. Usually, if an animal goes extinct, it leaves behind a cousin or a descendant that evolves into something else. Dinosaurs left us birds. Ancient fish left us, well, modern fish. But the Tully monster remains unique. There's nothing alive today that looks remotely like it, and that's exactly why scientists are still pulling their hair out trying to classify it. We aren't confused because we're missing the pieces. In fact, we have over 2,000 fossils. We're confused because we have nothing to compare it to. And who knows, oceans are largely unexplored, so we might run into some new creature eventually that will add new pieces to the evolutionary puzzle. The Tully monster might be the captain among the weird prehistoric swimmers, but it definitely wasn't alone. If we look back at the fossil record, especially during the Cambrian and Permian periods, we'll find a whole gallery of evolutionary experiments that look like they were designed by a committee of ETs. For example, we had hallucigenia, our upside-down creature. When scientists first found fossils of this tiny worm-like creature, they didn't know which side was up. On one side of its body, they saw long, sharp spines. On the other, they saw soft, stubby protrusions. They assumed the tough parts were legs and the soft protrusions were tentacles on the animal's back. Years later, better fossils revealed it was actually the other way around. The whole animal was put together upside down. The spines were like defensive spikes sticking up, and the softer parts were actually short legs meant to touch the ground. In other words, it wasn't walking on stilts at all. It had been upside down the whole time. Then there was Opabinia. This thing looks like a shrimp that got extremely confused. Most animals are happy with 2 eyes. Spiders have 8, but Opabinia decided it needed 5 for some reason. 5 mushroom-shaped eyes found out on its head, giving it a 360-degree view of the world. And if that wasn't enough, it had a long, flexible nozzle sticking out of its face, kind of like that of the Tully monster. When this animal was first presented at a science conference in the 1970s, the room actually erupted in laughter because everyone thought it was a practical joke. Finally, there was a creature called Helicoprion. At first glance, it looks like a shark. But look at the mouth. Instead of a normal jaw that opens and closes like a hinge, it had something called a tooth whorl. As it grew new teeth, the old ones rotated inward, creating a literal spiral of teeth in its lower jaw. It looked like a circular saw blade embedded in its chin. Scientists spent decades arguing about where this saw blade actually went. Some put it on the nose, some on the tail, until they finally realized it was inside the mouth. All of these creatures, the Tully monster, the upside-down worm, the 5-eyed shrimp, and the buzzsaw shark, remind us of one thing. We think we know what life looks like, but the history of our own planet proves that biology can be stranger than any sci-fi movie. We shouldn't assume evolution follows a straight line toward normal animals like us. Sometimes it takes a detour into the Twilight Zone.
In the past 30 years, scientists have made an incredible discovery of a new creature living deep beneath the surface of the ocean, and the name of the creature is the harp sponge. Now, if you're wondering why it took so long to come across this animal, then I might have the answer. These creatures typically hang out at a depth of roughly 11,100 feet beneath the ocean's waves. This sponge species was first discovered off the coast of California thanks to a robot that was sturdy enough to explore those crazy depths the ocean has to offer. This is no doubt an area of the planet where even the most benign-looking creatures can be potentially dangerous. But even scientists were surprised to find that this creature was more than just a sponge. Now, this might seem obvious, but the harp sponge got its name because its basic structure, referred to as a vein, is the same shape as a harp. Each vein is made up of a horizontal branch supporting several parallel vertical branches. But don't let the harp sponge's fanciful and amusing appearance or its non-intimidating name fool you. Yeah, the harp sponge is very much a deep-sea hunter. It has a unique ability to capture and envelop small animals using its rhizoids, short, thin fibers. With their help, the harp sponge clings on to the soft, muddy bottom and catches tiny creatures that get swept into its branches by deep-sea currents. Uh-oh. Other sponge creatures often feed by pulling bacteria and bits of organic matter from the seawater and filtering them through their bodies. But not our harp sponge. Instead, it snatches its future meal with minuscule barbed hooks that cover each of the harp sponge's branches. Now, harp sponges prefer tiny crustaceans like crabs, crayfish, shrimps, and prawns. Once the harp sponge has one of them in its clutches, it envelops the animal in a thin membrane before slowly beginning to digest it. So, pal, what's eating you? Oh, Harpo? Too bad. Researchers believe that harp sponges use this method of feeding because there aren't enough nutrients that deep down. This makes traditional filter feeding less effective. Research has shown that the creature is still in the process of evolving. Early harp sponges, researchers found, only had 2 veins. But later, scientists discovered other harp sponges that had 6 veins. The harp sponge might have evolved this elaborate candle holder-like structure to increase its surface area. In general, harp sponges typically grow up to a length of 1 foot, but researchers have seen a creature that was 2 feet in length. The harp sponge is not only very unusual, but also beautiful to look at. See those tiny white balls on top of the branches? Now, why don't we look at some other creatures that live below the photic zone of Earth's oceans? The photic zone means the area beneath the ocean's surface that still receives some sunlight. Thanks to this, there are loads of different creatures and organisms living there. Any animal living beyond this layer qualifies as a deep-sea creature. The Tomopterus worm is a segmented worm you can find in the twilight zone of the ocean. This is the area that lies between 650 and 3,300 feet beneath the surface. These creatures are often no more than 1 inch long, but the largest of them can grow up to 1 foot. While swimming around and feeding, these worms do what researchers describe as an amazing smooth dance. That's because the creatures can swim extremely quickly and maneuver at tight angles with ease. Now, I know most people hear the word worm and think of the common earthworm, so it's quite interesting to know there's a deep-sea worm out there that never leaves the water during its entire life. Similarly, most of us try to avoid jellyfish that either rest on the sand or sit on top of the ocean waves. This isn't the case with a chrysota jelly. That's a deep-sea creature too. This beautiful jellyfish is mostly ruby red, bright orange, or electric purple. That's what helped researchers realize they had found a new species of jellyfish. The creature grows to a maximum size of 1 inch across. It has tentacles that stretch out in every direction. Now, if you come close to this jellyfish, it'll pull all these tentacles in toward its body before rapidly swimming away to avoid danger. Yes, you are dangerous. The chrysota jelly is extremely rare. You won't see it very often. You might need to borrow that deep-sea diving robot I mentioned earlier. While worms and jellyfish might seem quite harmless, This isn't the case with the Pacific viperfish. Ooh. This creature is equipped with a noticeably big mouth, like me, and the needle-like teeth inside are key to its hunting strategy. Pacific viperfish live at around 5,000 feet below the ocean surface, but they're among those numerous marine animals that migrate each night from the ocean depths toward shallower waters to dine. What's on the menu for dinner tonight? Lots of small fish and shrimp. The creature can grow up to 12 inches in length. Its two front fangs, which stick up from the fish's bottom jaw past its own eyes, are especially dramatic. When the fish unhinges its jaw, its mouth can open wide enough to engulf smaller animals, and the teeth form a cage to prevent an escape. Now, have you ever seen an underwater creature that looks like a strawberry? Trust me, it does exist. Just look at these dots on the strawberry squid. The creature has a big eye and a smaller one. You might think this unconventional pairing would be awkward and uncomfortable, but it's actually the opposite. The big left eye looks upward. It spots shadows cast by other animals in the dimly lit waters above. The eye's tubular shape helps it collect as much light as possible. On the other side of the squid's head, you can see its right eye. It's small and looks downward. This eye searches for flashes of bioluminescence produced by animals lurking in the darker waters below. Now, bioluminescence means the production and emission of light by living organisms. By the way, the squid has a nickname. And no, it's not Squiggy, although that's a great one. It's known as the cockeyed squid. This is simply due to the remarkable difference in size between its two eyes. I think I like Squiggy better, and so it goes. Since light doesn't reach the deep sea, the strawberry squid's body actually looks black. This helps the creature hide from enemies, such as sharks and dolphins. In general, the strawberry squid grows to a length of 5 inches. It typically lives around 3,000 feet below the surface, but floats to shallower waters at night. Now, the feather star is a marine creature without a backbone, but with feather-like arms that radiate from the center of its body. These creatures first appeared around 200 million years ago. Related to sea stars, they look like a flower, but if you approach them, they'll quickly swim away. But not all feather stars can swim. Many species can only crawl along the bottom of the seafloor. Like some of the other deep-sea creatures we've looked at, the feather star can adapt to its surroundings. It has a creepy ability to shed its arms, the same way some lizards can shed their tails. This also helps them escape from their enemies. Feather stars live all across the globe, from the equator to the poles, from the shallow waters on top of reefs to the deep, deep sea. Now, given that we're dealing with mysterious creatures, the name of this one is quite fitting. The swift vampire squid should be the official symbol of life in the deep sea. The animal has a dark red body, huge blue eyes, and a cloak-like web that stretches between its 8 arms. This, along with its name, may suggest that the creature is some form of a terrifying hunter. In reality, though, the vampire squid is a soft-bodied, timid creature, about the size, shape, and color of a football. It grows to roughly 12 inches in length and lives 3,000 feet below the waves. There's almost no oxygen there, but also relatively few predators. Whew, I think I'll need to decompress from this one. Scientists have finally solved the Loch Ness Monster mystery. Here's the spoiler, you ready? It's not a real monster. It's probably a dinosaur that survived through the ages, or just a bunch of debris floating on the water. Thanks to many findings on the Loch Ness creature, we have proof of another story to tell you. It was 1933 when a man named George Spicer and his wife were driving along the shores of Loch Ness. That's when they saw something massive with a long neck moving across the road. It looked like a creature straight out of the prehistoric era, a dinosaur-like beast unlike anything they'd ever seen. That was the moment that Loch Ness monster theories started spreading around like wildfire. One of the most famous Loch Ness monster sightings came just a year later, in 1934, when a man took a photograph that became the most well-known image of Nessie. That's the nickname she was given. She? Anyways, the photo, known as the surgeon's photograph, showed a long-necked creature rising out of the water, and for years it convinced people that the monster was real. But years later, the truth came out. One of the men who helped take the photo confessed it was all a hoax. The photo had been staged after all. When the photo was published, it had been significantly cropped. This made the animal in the picture look much bigger than in real life, fueling the theories that the Loch Ness Monster did in fact exist. In the 1960s, one of the first big scientific attempts to investigate the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster happened. A research team took sonar equipment to the lake and spent hours scanning the waters in search of evidence of large creatures. What they found was puzzling. They recorded several objects moving deep in the loch, or lake, with no clear explanation as to what it was. Though the team didn't manage to capture anything definitive, this sighting helped fuel the belief that there was indeed something massive living in Loch Ness. After that, research about the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster kept popping up. In 1972, with the help of underwater photography, some researchers managed to capture strange images, which got people's hopes up for a minute. But the truth is, this early research about the Loch Ness Monster was far from conclusive. Now, of course, not everyone bought into the mystical, magical theories about the Loch Ness Monster. Theory 1, from a professor of zoology at Oxford University, has made it clear that the monster is a biological impossibility. Hey, my pediatrician said that about me, too. Meanwhile, he says that no skeletal remains have ever been found in the region. Plus, no fishermen have ever caught anything resembling the creature in their fishing nets. For him, this works as proof that it simply can't be real. When it comes to the famous photos of the Loch Ness Monster as evidence, well, that's pretty simple. The professor offers a more down-to-earth explanation. He argues that these images are either showing floating debris or birds, like cormorants, which have long necks and often appear to be low in the water. When people refute his suggestion, he takes us back to human psychology and explains that people often make mistakes and misjudge the size of things, especially when they just caught a glimpse of it, and even more so when they are hoping to see something specific. Now, many of those alleged photos depict an animal with a long neck and a small head, which has led some to believe that what they're seeing is a plesiosaur, a giant marine reptile that lived 215 million years ago and disappeared with the dinosaurs. The idea of a plesiosaur surviving all these years is a theory that's been around since the first sightings of the creature. But this researcher isn't buying it. He explains that no plesiosaur fossils have been found in the region dating to anything later than 66 million years ago. The idea of a prehistoric creature still lurking in the waters of Loch Ness just doesn't hold up scientifically. Then there's theory number 2, from a British naturalist who has spent over 50 years investigating the Loch Ness Monster phenomenon. His conclusion is a little less dramatic. He believes that most people who report sightings of long-necked creatures are misidentifying other animals. He suggests people think they are seeing a sea serpent. Reports of sightings from the Loch Ness Monster have been around since the 6th century CE, long before they were distilling Scotch whiskey or other explanations. Early reports of these sea serpents describe large creatures with long snake-like bodies and multiple humps. Some say the creatures were as big as boats, and many swore they saw something swimming in the waters. Many of these early sea serpent sightings may have been misunderstandings or exaggerations of normal animals in the loch, like large fish or even swimming birds. They could have been large eels, which are known to live in Loch Ness. These eels, especially when they're moving, might have given the impression of a long, undulating creature in the water. People who saw these eels from a distance, particularly in low light or misty conditions, might have mistaken them for something much more mysterious. Theory number 3 says something else. Nessie is just a series of standing waves. These happen when two boat wakes move in opposite directions, creating a big hump in the water that could look like a creature from a distance. Loch Ness enthusiasts even showed how it works, with footage from Fort Augustus, where a river meets Loch Ness. These enthusiasts had big plans to use drones with infrared cameras and special underwater microphones to search the loch. Now, Loch Ness is massive, stretching around 23 miles long and more than 700 feet deep. So, they thought they needed drones and infrared cameras to put an end to this discussion. But despite everything, they haven't found Nessie. But it's not only the Loch Ness Monster that lacks scientific explanation. There have also been scores of sightings of Yetis and Sasquatches that no one can really explain. Folks have made movies, dreaming of finding the truth about these creatures. But, according to recent research and evidence, it looks unlikely that we'll ever find definitive evidence of their existence. Science says they can explain Sasquatch sightings, and this is how. Biologists who study wildlife using camera traps, which are set up in remote areas to capture images of passing animals, have long attempted to find elusive species. These cameras detect movement and snap pictures, providing invaluable data on the biodiversity of different ecosystems. As camera traps collect more photos over time, the number of species recorded grows. However, after a while, the number plateaus, suggesting that no new species are being detected. While it's impossible to claim 100% certainty, researchers say that after significant camera deployment, it's safe to say the likelihood of discovering new species, especially large ones like Bigfoot or the Yeti, drops significantly. Camera trap studies have been running for years in regions where these creatures are rumored to live, but so far, no conclusive evidence has surfaced. Instead, the supposed proof of Bigfoot or the Yeti often comes from blurry photos or shaky videos taken by individuals who claim to have encountered them. The scientific understanding of biology also makes the existence of Bigfoot highly unlikely. Often described as a great ape, Bigfoot would have had to evolve in North America. However, great apes evolved in Africa, and the only great ape to make it to the Americas is Homo sapiens, whose ancestors crossed the Bering Strait only about 16,000 years ago. This is far too short a time for a new species like Bigfoot to have evolved. While it may be disappointing for these mysterious creature enthusiasts, the scientific evidence points firmly toward the conclusion that creatures like Bigfoot and the Yeti are more fantasy than reality. After decades of extensive scientific research, it's safe to say that yes, science has solved the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster, and it's pure fiction. So, what do you think?
75 million years ago, North America was full of scary dinos, both walking and flying, and insects the size of birds. But the biggest predator there was something way scarier, a crocodile so massive it could swallow dinosaurs whole. This beast was roughly the length of a school bus, weighed more than 5 tons, and had teeth the size of bananas. Its name was Deinosuchus, which literally means terrible crocodile. And trust me, it lived up to that name. Scientists have found its fossils all across North America, from Mexico to Texas to New Jersey and Montana. It means this monster could live pretty much anywhere it wanted. It wasn't picky. It roamed rivers, swamps, and even coastlines. And when it was hungry, anything that moved was fair game. Fossilized dinosaur bones show massive bite marks matching its jaw pattern. So yes, it actually took down dinosaurs. What's even crazier is its bite force. Based on skull reconstructions, scientists estimate it could crush bones with more power than T-Rex. So if a T-Rex ever got close to the water, it might have ended up as lunch. But Deinosuchus wasn't just a bigger and meaner version of today's crocodiles. It was more closely related to alligators. Recent studies show that it actually belonged to an ancient branch of crocodilians that split off before the ancestors of modern alligators and crocodiles.
It was like that weird cousin in your family tree who doesn't quite fit in, but somehow looks like everyone. It had traits from both groups, like salt glands that helped it survive in both freshwater and saltwater. That's rare because most crocs today can't handle salty environments for long. This feature might have been its secret superpower. Around that time, North America was divided by a massive inland sea called the Western Interior Seaway. It stretched from the Arctic Ocean down to the Gulf of Mexico. Deinosuchus could travel across it, sneaking along the coasts and striking anywhere there was food. Still, scientists argue about its favorite hangout spot. Some say it mostly lived in rivers and swamps, and the fossils found near the coast just happened to be preserved better there. Others think it really did patrol the ancient shoreline, waiting for dinosaurs that wandered too close. Either way, this reptile ruled its world, and the climate of its time helped it thrive. The late Cretaceous was a warm, humid idyll filled with wetlands, forests, and endless food sources. Giant turtles, fish the size of cars, and whole herds of herbivorous dinosaurs gave Deinosuchus an all-you-can-eat buffet. As long as the ecosystem stayed stable, it could keep getting bigger and bigger, and it did. Throughout Earth's history, huge crocodiles have evolved again and again. It's like nature's favorite blueprint for apex predator. Even today, Nile crocs and saltwater crocs are living proof that this ancient design still works perfectly. Some scientists even joke that crocodiles are basically dinosaurs that decided to chill and wait it out. They survived mass extinctions while most other big reptiles vanished. Deinosuchus wasn't so lucky and went extinct around 73 million years ago, most likely because the environment changed and its food sources dwindled. But the ocean is still full of mysteries. Maybe some gigantic croc-like beasts are still lurking out there. And while we're guessing, let's look at some other prehistoric creatures that make scientists rewrite what they thought we knew about life on Earth. First up, we have the Dragon of Death. Don't even make me pronounce its full name, Thanatos draconamaru. Scientists found its bones in western Argentina, in formation layers called the Plautier Formation, from about 86 million years ago, the late Cretaceous. This creature wasn't just big, it was gigantic for a flying reptile. Judging by some of its bones, it has a wingspan somewhere between 23 and 30 feet. That's like a small plane wing outstretched. It's officially one of the largest pterosaurs ever discovered in South America. Its fossils are pretty well preserved, including parts that are usually squishy and fragile in flying reptiles like vertebrae and limb bones. This gives scientists clues not just about how it moved, but about what ecosystems were like back then. Looks like it enjoyed marshy floodplains, big open skies, and plenty of prey below. Our dragon likely used its size to its advantage, either going after small dinosaurs or scavenging. The fact that this massive creature managed to evolve wings capable of flight is just crazy. Next, we've got a creature that looks like a mix of a dino and a skunk to me, Stegosaurus elengasin. Scientists found fossils of this cool guy in southern Chile among rocks deposited about 75 million years ago. The thing that hits you first, let's hope, not literally, is its tail. Instead of the usual spikes or clubs you get in other armored dinos like ankylosaurs, Stegosaurus had a flat blade-like tail made from fused bones. It looked almost like a weird paddle or frond. Scientists compare it to Aztec ammunition because of that blade structure across the tail's rear half. It wasn't huge, only about 6.5 feet long, but what it lacked in size it made up for in weirdness and cleverness. Its body had armor plates, protective skin scutes, and a skull structure showing features of different dinos. So it was kind of a hybrid in style, which got paleontologists rewriting some of the family trees of armored dinosaurs. Also, the fossil is unusually complete, about 80%, which is rare because armor bones are often damaged or missing. This is super useful for science because it shows us how armor evolved, especially in southern continents. And you definitely need to meet our next hero, a truly bizarre marine reptile that once patrolled the waters of what's now Wyoming, Serpentisuchops fisteri. This creature was part crocodile, part sea monster, and 100% nightmare fuel. Scientists first found its fossils over 25 years ago, but they only recently managed to piece together enough of its remains to truly understand it. It had a super long neck, which was normal for plesiosaurs, and a croc-like skull and body. Most fossil books would tell you these traits shouldn't exist in the same animal. So this guy was a stunning exception. Paleontologists have found its lower jaw, a large portion of its skull, neck vertebrae, tail, and ribs. So they were able to reconstruct not just what it looked like, but how it likely moved, swam, and hunted. About 35% of its body is preserved, which is not so often for marine reptiles, and it lets scientists learn a lot about its lifestyle. With its long neck and the power of a crocodile, plus a super combo of speed, reach, and bite, this guy was most likely a top predator of its time. Last but not least, we have this cool dino, Duonicus tsokhtbatari, that lived in Mongolia's Gobi Desert around 90 to 95 million years ago during the Cretaceous period. It wasn't a meat-eater like T-Rex, but more of a plant muncher. It grew to about 10 feet long, roughly the size of a tall adult human lying down, and weighed around 575 pounds. Pretty hefty for a leaf-eater. The craziest thing about this heavy guy was its hands. It only had 2 fingers on each hand, and each finger carried a giant curved claw about a foot long, covered in keratin, the same stuff your nails are made of. That keratin actually added over 40% to the claw's length, which is super rare to see preserved in fossils. Because of that, scientists can actually study the full shape and structure of the claw, not just the bone. Its hands weren't just for show, though. We can see fused wrist bones and stiff joints in the fossil, which means it could grab and pull down branches to eat leaves. So, having fewer fingers could actually be a bonus if your goal is to reach and rip down vegetation. It's a really cool example of how dinosaurs adapted in weird and specific ways to survive.
Now, you can't find living dinosaurs nowadays, which is a good thing, mostly, but you can still meet some creatures that might have gone to lunch with them. The frilled shark, for example, is a living fossil that comes from a family of sharks that have been around for about 80 million years. One of the coolest things about it is its long, eel-like body that can grow as long as 6 feet. It has 6 pairs of gills on its throat, which help the frilled shark breathe in the deep, cold ocean where there isn't much oxygen. The shark can move very quickly, like a snake, to catch its prey when it least expects it. Little frilled sharks take an exceptionally long time to grow, up to 3.5 years, which is one of the longest times for any animal with a backbone. The Chinese giant salamander is another living fossil that can tell you what was going on Earth around 170 million years ago. Now, when I say tell, I really mean it, as it can make sounds like hisses, whistles, and barks, and even a noise that sounds like a crying kid. The biggest Chinese salamander found so far weighed 130 pounds, as heavy as 2 Dalmatians, and was almost 6 feet long. Giant salamanders like to be alone. Hey, I want to be alone. And will chase away other salamanders from their space, except when it's time to start a family. During the day, they hide and sleep under rocks. They can make a special substance from their skin that keeps predators away. Now, gharials are reptiles that have been around for about 38 million years. They live in India and Nepal in slow-moving, muddy rivers. Sadly, there are very few gharials left in the wild, less than 100. These creatures can't control their body temperature, so they need to sunbathe to get warm or cool down in the water if they get too hot. Their eyes are close together and face forward, which helps them see in 3 dimensions and judge distances more accurately. Gharials also have a transparent third eyelid that protects their eyes when they're underwater. They have over 100 sharp teeth, but they can't chew their food. Instead, they use their strong jaws to grab prey and then, swallow it whole. The alligator gar is a fish that has a family history of more than 100 million years. It still has some cool features from ancient times, like being able to breathe both air and water. It also has a special spiral-shaped intestine, like a shark. The alligator gar is one of the biggest and heaviest fish in North America. Just like an alligator, it has a long body and snout, plus a row of sharp teeth. But instead of legs, the gar has fins to help it swim underwater. The tuatara isn't a lizard as you might think, and isn't a dinosaur either. This New Zealand resident is one of the most unique animals in the world. Scientists love studying tuataras because they can help us understand how today's lizards and snakes evolved. One of the coolest things about the tuatara is its third eye, called a parietal eye, on its head. It has its own lens, retina, and a nerve that connects it to the brain. Scientists think it might help the tuatara know when it's light or dark outside and absorb sunlight to make vitamin D or help them keep their body temperature exactly right. Tuataras can live an extraordinarily long time, up to 100 years. Cassowaries are the youngsters on our list, as they've been around for only 60 million years. They have some things in common with dinosaurs, like their three-toed feet and how they breathe. Cassowaries love to eat fruit, lots and lots of fruit. This love of fruit helps the rainforest because when cassowaries eat the fruit, their bodies don't harm the seeds inside. As they move around the forest, they spread these seeds, you can guess how, with their own natural fertilizer, helping new plants grow. Cassowaries are big birds, about 6 feet tall and weigh over 100 pounds. They have a special claw on each foot that is 5 inches long, and they can use it to kick real fast. If they feel threatened, they can charge, kick, and even jump on someone. They can also leap up to 5 feet in the air. So, the best thing to do is stay far, far away from where they live. The order Notostraca is a group of crustaceans that you may know as tadpole shrimp or shield shrimps. These animals have been around for about 360 million years. They have a wide, flat shell that covers their head, and they have a pair of eyes on top. These creatures can be found all over the world in different kinds of water, like freshwater, brackish water, and even salty pools. They can also look different depending on where they live. Notostracans aren't picky eaters and can snack on pretty much anything, from plants to small animals and other shrimps. Some of them are considered pests in places like California rice paddies because they stir up the mud, which blocks sunlight from reaching the young rice plants. Sturgeons are some of the largest fish species on the planet. They live only in the cool waters of the northern hemisphere and never travel below the equator. Even though they are huge, sturgeons don't have teeth. They eat by sucking food off the bottom of rivers, gulfs, lakes, and oceans. Scientists believe that sturgeons came from a group of fish that first appeared around 419 million years ago, long before dinosaurs even existed. Their ancestors survived a big extinction event that wiped out 90% of all species and went on to become the largest fish in many rivers in North America and Eurasia. Sturgeons can live up to 100 years old or even older. Female sturgeons can lay up to 3 million eggs at a time, but not all of the eggs eventually turn into real fish. Our next hero, the Pacific lamprey, has successfully lived through at least 4 mass extinctions. Its ancient ancestors evolved over 450 million years ago. These creatures have cartilage instead of bones and a third eye, which is a special light-sensing organ on top of their heads. Instead of a regular jaw, they have a mouth surrounded by teeth. They latch onto prey and sup up body fluids like real underwater vampires. And although he wasn't living underwater, the story goes that King Henry I of England might have lost his life because of a lamprey. The English monarch loved this fish so much that he defied doctors' orders to stop eating its flesh. He got sick every time he'd have it, but the lack of bones and the unusual taste made the royal fall in love with it. As a result, he got some scary symptoms from eating lamprey and eventually passed away. Can you say clueless? The elephant fish, also called the Australian ghost shark, has been on Earth for around 400 million years. Even though they're related to sharks, they aren't actually sharks. Instead of bones, their bodies are made entirely of cartilage. These fish have a special shiny tissue in their eyes that can make their eyes look like they change color from yellow to green. Elephant fish can be pretty tough and will fight back if they feel threatened. They like to be alone and usually don't hang out with other fish. Horseshoe crabs also deserve the title of survival champs, as they've been around even before dinosaurs, since 450 million years ago. 4 species are still roaming the ocean from Maine all the way to Mexico. Horseshoe crabs are more like spiders than they are like real crabs. They have 9 eyes, plus extra light sensors near their tails, so they can see really well. They breathe underwater using flap-like gills near their belly, and sometimes they use these gills to swim upside down. Every spring, when the tide is high, these creatures come up to the beach at night to mate and lay their eggs, and you can see hundreds of thousands of them. Okay, are you ready for an epic fight between 2 prehistoric predators? Well, hang on. Look at this creature. You know it. An ancient shark about 65 feet long that used to swim through the dark waters of the world's oceans and was so terrifying it had no enemies. Well, almost. Scientists have recently discovered the remains of another ancient predatory fish off the coast of Australia, a fish that lived around the same time as Megalodon. It was small, about the size of a dolphin, but it could pose a danger to the infamous shark. How is it possible if this creature was many times smaller? Well, let's take a look. This monster is called Janjucetus, and technically it wasn't exactly a fish. It was a distant relative of the modern baleen whale. Outwardly, it may seem quite cute, similar to that baleen whale I mentioned, but you wouldn't want to meet it in the ocean. It had the massive skull of a whale, large eyes the size of tennis balls, and a short snout with an immensely powerful jaw filled with razor-sharp teeth. In other words, it was like a shark version of the baleen whale. Janjucetus lived during an ancient period called the Oligocene, which was about 33 to 23 million years ago. At that time, there was an incredible abundance of life in the world's waters. Giant penguins, small whales, sharks 2 to 3 times larger than modern ones, primitive dolphin species, and many other unusual creatures. Now imagine that in this ancient and terrifying neighborhood, a giant megalodon met a Janjucetus. At first sight, it's not love. The megalodon's victory is obvious, but don't rush to write the Janjucetus off. It's agile and fast. It's quite possible that it was more mobile than Megalodon, and during the fight, it would have avoided a direct attack. The Megalodon would have lost sight of such a small opponent, while the Janjucetus would have swum up to the shark's belly and opened its jaws. They're small, but there are a lot of sharp teeth. Now, these teeth were designed to rip and cut. The Janjucetus would attack the Megalodon with a small but very unpleasant bite, and the shark would have swum away after such a punch. But who knows? Maybe Megalodon would have immediately eaten Janjucetus in the first seconds of the fight. Megalodon could have won, but in terms of speed and mobility, it would have lost. So let's look at something bigger, something that could actually have competed with Megalodon. It doesn't have to be a monster living at the same time as the ancient shark. We can make our own rules. Imagine that all ancient marine creatures ended up in the same pool with Megalodon. So its next opponent is the Liopleurodon. Now initially scientists thought that this monster could grow to be 82 feet long, which is even larger than Megalodon. But more accurate studies have shown that it only reached 32 feet, which is about the size of a modern orca. The Liopleurodon lived in the waters of Western Europe around 160 to 155 million years ago and shared territory with other dangerous reptiles such as ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. Yes, it was smaller than them, but it had one big advantage. The Liopleurodon possessed one of the largest jaws in the animal kingdom, which accounted for about 20% of the total length of its entire body. That's a mouth. Its jaws were about 6.5 feet long. A huge, toothy mouth the size of an adult basketball player filled with smooth and dagger-sharp teeth, ideal for cutting steaks and peeling ammonite shells. And by the way, scientists suspect that ammonites and squid were the creature's main diet. This super predator was also a very fast and agile creature that ambushed and attacked its prey from below. Megalodon would have been in big trouble. The grip strength of a Liopleurodon would surely be more powerful than that of Megalodon. Besides, the Liopleurodon's size and mobility would allow it to attack the enemy from different sides. It's probably why Megalodon would have lost in that fight. The next opponent for our megalodon is the Dunkleosteus, and to be honest, this guy has almost no chance of defeating the large ancient shark. But the megalodon probably wouldn't have beaten it either. The Dunkleosteus was one of the earliest predators of the ocean. It lived in the late Devonian, about 382 to 358 million years ago. Its size was about 13 to 32 feet or even less, and it also had no teeth. What? A predator without teeth? How did it survive in a dangerous prehistoric world? Well, it grabbed and chewed food with the help of special jaw growths. Those growths were so powerful that they could pierce steel, if there was any around. In a sense, these were not teeth, but bones. Okay, let's say the megalodon grabbed this predator by the belly and it couldn't do anything with its growths. But the problem is that the megalodon would have hardly done anything either, because the Dunkleosteus was a heavily armored fish. Just look at this shell. It probably limited its mobility, but it provided incredible protection. This monster felt like a big stone in the teeth of the megalodon. It's unlikely that the megalodon would have wanted to chew this stone. It would have spit it out, and both predators would have gone about their business. We've got a draw here. And now, the final match. Here's the next opponent. Do you see anything? Is this enemy invisible? What's happening? Ah, there it is. Meet the telemonstrum. It's a tiny ancient monster just 11 inches long. Huh? What can it do to a giant shark? Next to the megalodon, the telemonstrum is like a box of matches compared to a human. But if the megalodon had had a developed brain, like people do, it would have been very scared of this creature and would have immediately swum away. Many people scream and run away in fear when they see a creepy insect crawling or flying, or when a mouse runs across the floor. Some of us jump on the couch in horror. Not all of us, but some. The megalodon would have jumped out of the water like a dolphin if the telemonstrum had charged at it. Just check it out. It looks like an underwater bike with a long trunk with a jaw at the end. And these handlebars, where you would put your hands to control your bike, are the eyes. It's like the eyes of a hammerhead fish, only thinner and longer. The body of a squid, cuttlefish fins, snail eyes, and a toothed proboscis. This is a horror movie character. Scientists say it probably hunted jellyfish, small fish, and shrimp. And it didn't chew the food, it licked it like ice cream. Obviously, it's not an opponent for the megalodon, but it's still a creepy monster. Well, what would have happened had it really started a fight with the megalodon? It would have been difficult for the ancient shark to find it. It would have been unlikely to catch this tiny monster in the mouth, and the telemonstrum wouldn't have been able to do anything to the megalodon either. However, I can think of one strategy. The creepy creature had a long trunk. What if it had just swum under the megalodon's fin and started licking it? If the shark had felt the tickles, then it would probably have worked. But most likely, they wouldn't have fought each other. It seems like they would have made perfect friends. The telemonstrum lived about 300 million years ago in shallow seas and estuaries that covered the territory of the U.S. When scientists discovered this creature in 1955, they were shocked because no one had any idea what it was. Experts compared it to worms, tunicates, conodonts, mollusks, and vertebrates. And do you know who it really was? Well, scientists still have no idea. They can't determine its place on the tree of evolution. Perhaps this is some new branch, and its descendants simply haven't survived to this day. The megalodon was one of the most dangerous predators on Earth. But now we know that other equally scary monsters lived in the oceans. But what if the megalodon lived today? Who could have defeated him? A blue whale who would be even bigger than this ancient shark. But the blue whale seems to be a kind animal. It wouldn't fight. How about the kraken? The kraken versus the megalodon? Well, let's save this fight for another video.
Scientists and geologists are out there in the vast ocean, towing these trusty devices, also known as streamer cables. They drop these cables about 16 to 65 feet deep, with each stretching over 20,000 feet long. Now you can imagine that this whole setup creates quite a commotion underwater, attracting all sorts of curious creatures. And guess who shows up for the party? Sharks. Yep, these toothy pals are drawn to the magnetic fields of the streamer cables and sometimes mistake them for a chewy snack. Now, before you start thinking that sharks have a personal vendetta against these cables, let me tell you something. This is not a new problem. It's been going on since the 1980s. Even big players like Google have faced these underwater cable conundrums. They had to surround these internet cables with a fancy material to protect them from shark teeth. I mean, can you imagine a shark causing a delay in your internet browsing? That's one hungry predator with a serious grudge against technology. So, why exactly are sharks so keen on these cables? Well, no one knows for sure. Some scientists think it's because sharks have a thing for electromagnetic fields and get curious. Others believe they just have a thing for anything cable-shaped. It's not all sharks that cause such problems, but which of them are the troublemakers in this aquatic tale? Well, it depends on the depth of the cables. For example, when it comes to a particular depth, the bull sharks seem to be the mischief makers. These bad boys have solid gray physiques and short snouts. They're like the bullies of the underwater neighborhood, causing trouble wherever they go. Bull sharks are widely found in tropical and warm waters around the world, and they seem to have a knack for seeking out these streamer cables. Now I know what you're thinking. Did these scientists really catch a group of bull sharks and make them bite cables just for science? Nope, they're way too clever for that. Instead, they used a 3D scan of an authentic bull shark jaw to create a computer model. Talk about high tech. They simulated shark attacks on the cables, measuring the impact and compression forces. It turns out that a shark can really do a number on those cables. But here's the kicker. The strength of the cables depends on how fast the shark is swimming when it decides to take a chomp. So if you see a shark cruising by at top speed, you better watch out for those cables. But wait. We can't blame the poor sharks entirely for the fate of these underwater cables. A 2009 report points out that a lot of fish have a considerable history of nibbling on cables. It's like a buffet for these underwater creatures. Barracudas, sharks from shallow and deep waters, and even some other sneaky culprits have been identified as cable biters. They just can't resist sinking their teeth into the cable wrapping, which then lets the power conductor hang out with the seawater. It's a recipe for cable failure. Still curious about the fascinating world of cable installation? Did you know that more than over 90% of international data takes a watery journey? These cables, which are like underwater highways, stretch for hundreds of thousands of miles beneath the ocean's surface, reaching depths as deep as the size of Mount Everest. Now, you might be wondering how these cables are placed. Well, it's not as simple as dropping wires in the water like in the cartoons. In fact, it requires some careful planning and specialized boats called cable layers. These brave boats meticulously run the cables across the flat surfaces of the ocean floor, making sure to steer clear of all obstacles that Mother Nature throws their way. When it comes to cable sizes, the shallow water cables are about as thick as a soda can. On the other hand, deep water cables are way smaller, measuring up to the size of a marker. Why the difference, you ask? Well, it's all about vulnerability. Way down there, 8,000 feet below sea level, there isn't much action going on. Therefore, these deep-sea cables don't need as much shielding wire for protection. They're like the skinny swimmers of the cable world, gliding through the depths with ease. But let's not forget about the installation costs. Brace yourself, because placing a cable across the vast expanse of the ocean is no bargain. We're talking about millions of dollars. Now, the actual price may vary depending on factors like the total length of the cable and its destination. But trust me, it's definitely not pocket change. Installing shallow water cables is quite the spectacle. They're carefully stuffed beneath the ocean floor using high-pressure water jets. It's like giving these cables a cozy underground home, shielding them from the whims of the ocean currents. So, while cable installation may be slow, and, let's face it, a bit expensive, it's truly a remarkable feat of engineering. The underwater world is a complex and delicate ecosystem, and the cable layers take great care to ensure that their installations don't disrupt the marine life and habitats that call the ocean home. It's a balancing act between technological progress and oceanic conservation, and they're doing a pretty good job at it. Whenever you browse the internet, remember that your cat videos and funny memes might just be zipping through those submarine cables deep beneath the waves. But burying cables safely underwater isn't actually a modern idea, you know. Hold on tight because we're going on a time-traveling adventure back to the mid-19th century. Picture this. It's 1854, and something groundbreaking is about to happen. the installation of the very first transatlantic telegraph cable begins, linking the distant shores of Ireland and Newfoundland. Now, before you roll your eyes and say, "Old news, buddy," let's remember that this was a pretty big deal back then. Fast forward 4 years, and the moment of truth arrives. The first transmission is sent through the cable, carrying a message that goes something like this. Laws. White House received 5-minute signal. Coil signals too weak to relay. Try drive slow and regular. I have put intermediate pulley. Reply by coils. Okay. Maybe not the most exhilarating message ever sent. But hey, they were just getting started. Now, let's put ourselves in the shoes of those remarkable folks involved in this undersea endeavor. Imagine being the lead electrician of the Atlantic Telegraph Company, also known as White House, in the message. He must have been quite the electrician extraordinaire. To put things into perspective, while our cable pioneers were busy laying the groundwork for transatlantic communication, the world outside was bustling with activity. Charles Dickens, that literary genius, was still crafting his timeless novels. Meanwhile, a little settlement named Dallas was officially incorporated in the vast state of Texas. It's pretty incredible to think about how far we've come since then, with our high-speed internet and seamless global communication. Could you really take down the internet by simply going underwater with a pair of wire cutters? Well, technically, yes. You'll need to be all geared up, wearing your snazzy scuba suit and holding a pair of trusty wire cutters. You can also add a mischievous grin on your face just to create the right ambiance, don't you agree? Now, let's get serious. Cutting through those super important submarine communications cables is no easy task. They carry thousands of seriously dangerous volts. But here's the deal. Someone actually did it in Egypt back in 2013. A group of daring individuals wearing their sleek wetsuits and equipped with wire cutters decided to give it a go. Their target? The Southeast Asia Middle East West, Europe E4 cable. A whopping 500-mile lifeline that connects 3 continents. As soon as those mischievous cable cutters did their thing, chaos ensued. Internet speeds in Egypt took a nosedive, plummeting by a staggering 60%. Can you imagine the frustration of trying to load a cute puppy video and having to wait for ages? But hey, let's keep things lighthearted here. The internet, like a phoenix, rose from the ashes once the cable was repaired. Speeds were restored, and everyone could once again binge-watch their favorite shows and indulge in endless rounds of online gaming.
There are plenty of fish in the sea. Some of them look totally like Nemo or Dory. Then there's the butterfly fish and fancy guppy, which is indeed really fancy. And then there's... what on earth is that? I would definitely not pay for a diving experience to see this guy. The anglerfish has the unofficial title of the ugliest animal in the world, but I wouldn't dare to break that news to it. There are more than 200 species of anglerfish currently swimming somewhere in the gloomy depths of the Atlantic and Antarctic Oceans, up to a mile below the surface. Some of them prefer different living conditions, the shallow tropical environments. Different kinds of anglerfish vary in shape and size, from the famous black sea devil to frogfish, monkfish, footballfish, goosefish, batfish, and sea toad. The larger ones can be half as long as a full-sized bed, but most are less than a foot long. Since the choice of meals where these guys live isn't that huge, they had to come up with a unique hunting strategy. They don't waste their priceless life energy on following prospective prey. Instead, they use a piece of dorsal spine that sticks above their mouths like a fishing pole, hence the name of the fish. There's a sac of bioluminescent bacteria that glows brightly in the dark at the end of that rod. The light lures prey, and all the anglerfish has to do is wait, and then enjoy its lunch delivered right to its mouth. Their bodies are pliable and huge, so they can easily swallow prey twice their size. Deep-sea anglerfish eat whatever they can find. Species that live in more shallow water aren't picky either, and can eat anything from shrimp to snails and small fish. Only female anglerfish have the cool fishing rod feature though. So what about their males? Finding a soulmate deep under the sea isn't that easy. I mean, literally, there's no light down there. Plus, there are frigid temperatures and low oxygen levels. Anglerfish can't afford to go on many dates in those conditions. so they mate for life. And before you go aw about it, I have to tell you, they do it in quite a special way. Male anglerfish are much smaller than their ladies. The contrast is so striking that when researchers first got interested in their love life, they thought those males were actually the offspring, or larvae, hanging out next to their moms. Certain anglerfish male species have receptors that alert them that there's a female nearby. After they mate, the male bites into his woman and stays attached to her head, belly, near her tail, and other areas he can access. While they morph together forever, the female fish gets the male's cells, DNA, and reproductive organs, but loses her immune response cells. The male gets free permanent housing and nutrition. Given the current real estate prices, it sounds like a dream. But that accommodation is shared by up to 8 males, and they can't move out if they ever feel like it. You're unlikely to meet this deep-sea fish in real life, but if you meet an anglerfish in your favorite video game, remember that you can easily outswim it and make it kinder to you with tranquilizing arrows. Once you befriend it, the anglerfish can be your scout and help you discover new areas with its bioluminescent pods. Back in the real world, down in the twilight zone of the ocean, about 650 to 3,300 feet down, the anglerfish isn't the only creature you're lucky you'll probably never meet. Many of the locals look like they come straight out of science fiction or horror movies, but that's because they had to adapt to this dark, deep world. I did my best to get you prepared for the creatures you're going to meet, starting with the common fangtooth. They spend most of their lives deep down, but at night, they move toward the surface to snack. These guys are more active than most other deep-sea dwellers. They don't wait for food to come their way, but actually follow it, and then get it with their long, hungry teeth. They don't have a built-in light bulb like the anglerfish, so they've developed a great sense of smell and use as much sunlight as they can get there in the depth to get around. Sometimes, even the shadow of a passing by prospective prey is enough for them to switch to action mode. And though they don't look too charming, they're completely harmless to humans if you ever run into one of these guys. Stoplight Loosejaw sounds like a great name for an alternative band, but it's actually another deep-sea resident with sneaky hunting habits. It has special light-producing photophores under each eye. They emit green and red light like a stoplight, hence the name of the fish. Unlike other fish, these guys hardly ever leave the twilight and midnight zones. Their lower jaw is a quarter of the total body length, and the stoplight keeps it open all the time, hoping to get some lunch. It looks like a ferocious predator, but mostly prefers zooplankton with an occasional dessert of shrimp, krill, and fish. I'm sure you didn't expect to meet a hybrid of an eel and a bird, but here it is! The slender snipe eel has a beak, much like that of a bird, with curving tips. The beak is equipped with tiny hooked teeth that the eels use to catch the antennae of delicious shrimp. And it sure is slender, stretching up to 5 feet and weighing only a few ounces. Scientists don't know all of this guy's secrets, since it's pretty tricky to study in their natural habitat. But it looks like they only produce offspring once in a lifetime, and then pass away. Glass squids like to take it easy in life and literally go with the flow. They're filled with a solution which is lighter than water, so they don't have to make any effort to move around the deep sea looking for food and partners. These creatures are transparent, so they blend into any landscape and don't even cast a shadow while moving. Talk about a great survival tactic. If danger finds it anyway, it can transform into a lumpy ball, pushing its head and tentacles into its mantle cavity. It can also release ink into the mantle and go from transparent to black. The same ink can protect it against hungry whales and seabirds. Another tactic they use to scare off predators is to activate their light-emitting organs around their eyes. I'm getting hungry. Maybe I can snack on this sea cucumber. Ouch, it's moving! So I guess it doesn't belong in a salad after all. These soft-bodied fellows live in all parts of the ocean, from shallow waters to the deep underwater world. Most of them slowly move around with their tiny feet, but some crawl around by flexing their bodies. Sea cucumbers can shed their internal organs when there's a predator approaching. Those sticky organs distract the intruder, and the happy cucumber moves on and just grows the organs back. What's that glistening in the distance? Looks like someone dropped gems in the water. That's a sea sapphire, also known as the most beautiful animal you've never seen. Some males of this type of copepod can change color from deep blue to purple, red, or gold. 1 second later, it's gone. And it's back, shimmering bright. The secret to this magic is that their bodies are transparent and reflect light differently at certain angles. It looks like it's their way of communicating between each other and attracting mates. Female sea sapphires don't have the same superpower, but their eyes are bigger compared to males, probably to spot them from a distance. Males roam wild and free, and their ladies stay in the crystal palaces of strange barrel-shaped jellies called salps.
You know, it's pretty tough to come up with something original when you've never seen it before. But what about those creepy mythical creatures then? Werewolves, vampires, or let's say, cyclopses? Don't worry, cyclops as we picture them never actually roamed the earth, as far as I know. But their creation definitely had some real-world inspiration. Turns out, ancient tales of these one-eyed giants might have been stirred up by a certain animal: dwarf elephants. Let's rewind to the Pleistocene era. It's where the inspiration for Cyclops lies. When sea levels were lower, animals could waltz from one island to another. Elephants and mammoths were just chilling together. But then the Ice Age ended, and ice melted, and bam! Those land bridges were underwater, leaving some animals stranded. With food running low, smaller elephants had the best chance at survival, leading to dwarf versions that were just about 3 feet tall at the shoulder. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When those little elephants passed away, they left behind skeletons that might have looked like a giant with a single eye. The trunk, which is soft and doesn't fossilize well, was gone. And without tusks, the skulls could totally resemble something out of a monster mash. Yikes! So when the Greeks showed up and stumbled upon these skulls, they could have thought they had stumbled upon massive creatures with a single eye. And poof! The legend of the Cyclops was born. Remember that cute cartoon about a mermaid? Well, sorry to break your pink glasses, but the true story didn't end happily. The Little Mermaid and Eric did not tie the knot. In Hans Christian Andersen's original fairy tale, the Little Mermaid is faced with the choice to slay the prince. However, when it's time to act, she discovers that she is unable to harm him. Instead, she chooses to sacrifice herself to save him, ultimately turning into sea foam. Right, but where does the mermaid character come from? Hans Christian Andersen wasn't the first to dream up mermaids. Long ago, people thought the ocean was full of all kinds of mythical beings, like krakens and sea serpents, adding a bit of mystery to the waters. The earliest known half-fish, half-human character is Wanus, a Babylonian deity from the 4th century BCE who swam ashore by day and returned to the sea at night. Similarly, ancient Greek sirens, initially depicted as birdwomen, lured sailors to their demise in Homer's Odyssey. Over time, they've turned into the fish-tailed mermaids we know today, with the word siren now often meaning mermaid in several languages. Traditionally, they're wicked. Sure, mermaids are just make-believe, but their stories can grab people's imagination. Like Christopher Columbus. When he sailed in 1492, he swore he saw a mermaid. Spoiler alert, it was actually a manatee, which is basically the original sea cow. And they're not even that much of fish, they're closer relatives to elephants. Now, it might seem strange to mix up a lazy sea creature with a gorgeous half-fish lady, but it's not just Columbus who made that mistake. That's why manatees and their cousins, dugongs, are grouped together in Sirenia. In Japanese folklore, certain animals are attributed with supernatural qualities believed to affect human affairs. These entities fall under the category of yokai, specifically known as henge or shapeshifters. The most notable among these creatures are the cunning fox spirits, called kitsune, and the tanuki.
Let's tackle this one step at a time. If you Google tanuki, you'll get a bunch of adorable pics in Google Images. The reason for that is simple. It is indeed tanuki in Japanese, but in English, we should say Japanese raccoon dog if we want to refer to an actual animal. However, the word tanuki can have two meanings, both an actual animal and its folklore namesake. The mythical version, called bake tanuki, pops up in stories and legends all over Japan, while tanuki are real animals. Bake tanuki are portrayed as quirky, supernatural beings. In some areas, the tanuki is said to have shape-shifting abilities, similar to those of foxes. It can become anything or anyone, and some stories even claim that it can possess humans. Now, kitsune are inspired by foxes. Their looks speak for themselves. These magical animals get wiser and more powerful as they age. Just like tanuki, they can shapeshift into humans or other forms, and they're known for their tricks. While some stories talk about kitsune playing pranks, others show them as loyal friends or even lovers. Back in ancient Japan, foxes and humans hung out a lot, leading to all sorts of legends. By the way, the number of tails a kitsune has is the key. The more tails, up to 9, the older and more powerful it is. Some folks even make offerings to them as if they were deities. I mean, who wouldn't want a wise fox on their side? Today, dire wolves are widely recognized due to their connection with the Stark kids in Game of Thrones. However, these creatures were not merely a product of the show's creators' imagination. Much larger than contemporary wolves, dire wolves inhabited the Americas until their extinction around 10,000 years ago. Over 4,000 fossilized remains of these animals were unearthed at the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, where they may have become trapped while scavenging on the remains of other animals that had fallen in. The dire wolf had an exceptionally large skull, yet its brain was smaller compared to that of modern wolves. If they had possessed larger brains, they might have been more discerning and recognized the dangers posed by the tar pits. Additionally, while there is no record of albino dire wolves, albino cubs have been documented among modern wolves. Check out this creepy sea serpent with multiple heads. It's called the Hydra in Greek mythology, and according to the legend, one of its 9 heads was immortal. So every time you lopped one off, 2 more popped up. Hercules had to take on this beast as one of his biggest challenges, and his nephew lent a hand. While Hercules was busy playing whack-a-mole with the heads, his nephew was cauterizing the wounds to stop them from coming back. Eventually, he managed to chop off the immortal head and buried it under a hefty rock. Believe it or not, this wild story might have had a basis in reality. There are a few documented cases of snakes with multiple heads, though 9 is pretty rare. Reptiles seem to be more prone to this kind of thing compared to other animals. Still, no records about one of those heads being immortal. Duh. Giants have been a part of stories forever. Take Greek mythology, for example. There's the Gigantus, a wild crew of 100 giants that sprang from Gaia after she had had a rough breakup with Uranus. Not exactly a fairy tale, right? Then there's Ergelmir from Norse mythology, who was born when icy Nilfheim waters mixed with the fiery heat of Muspelheim. Now let's switch gears to real-life giants. Some folks had a condition called hereditary gigantism, which helps explain the tales of these towering figures. Scientists think they found a gene linked to it. Plus, some people have pituitary tumors that kick growth hormones into overdrive. Take Goliath, for example. He was reportedly over 9 feet tall. There's no universal height for a giant since it varies by culture. A study even suggested that Goliath might have had a genetic background contributing to his size. When David took him down with a slingshot, he hit Goliath right in the forehead. Imagine if Goliath had had a pituitary tumor messing with his eyesight. It would have been a classic case of didn't see that one coming. And speaking of giants, meet Robert Wadlow, the tallest guy ever recorded. He stood at an insane 8 feet 11.1 inches and weighed 439 pounds. Basically, a human reindeer. As a kid, he was always the tallest. At 8, he was already as tall as his father, and by 9, he could carry him around. By graduation, he had hit 8 feet 4 inches.
Now, prepare yourself for some weird stuff. We're going to dive into the fascinating world of sea cucumbers, the squishy detritivores that are nature's very own recyclers. These exotic marine creatures might not be everyone's first choice for a pet, but trust me, they've got some unique talents that are worth talking about. Sea cucumbers are colorful little creatures with a digestive tract that's basically just a hole at either end. Their bodies are fat and squishy, covered in leathery skin. And guess what? They breathe through their butts. These amazing creatures have found a way to make the most out of every part of their body, few as they are. Now, you might be wondering what sea cucumbers do with their unique set of skills. Well, they play a crucial role in cleaning our planet's waters. They munch on all the debris found on the seabed and break it down internally, removing all the bad stuff in the process. It's like having little vacuums cleaning up the ocean floor. Believe it or not, sea cucumbers are in high demand in the kitchen too. They're harvested and traded in many countries. The Asian market, in particular, absolutely loves them. You can find them being sold cooked and dried under all sorts of fancy names. Or, if you prefer a more direct approach, you can just call them sea slugs. Now, here's the fun part. A dried sea cucumber can cost you up to a whopping $1,400 per pound. These squishy delicacies are truly worth their weight. But let's take a step back in time. The tradition of eating sea cucumbers goes way back, more than 1,000 years in Asia to be precise. And as demand for these curious creatures grew, so did the need to find them elsewhere. This led to overexploitation of local fisheries, causing sea cucumber stocks to diminish in many countries. Uh-oh, not good for our little sea cucumber friends. One of the most interesting examples of sea cucumbers is the pink see-through Fantasia. Not only does it look amazing, but it also has this great defense system, where it uses bioluminescence to scare off predators. Thankfully, some brilliant researchers around the world have decided to act. They're on a mission to breed sea cucumbers and replenish the depleted fisheries. They're also exploring how these creatures can be a reasonable food resource and help reduce the damage done by fish farming. In Scotland, for instance, where a team of enthusiastic students started a company for this particular purpose. Their goal? To figure out how sea cucumbers can absorb as much of the bad stuff they can in the water. They might just be the aquatic superheroes we've been waiting for. Meanwhile, in Sweden, marine biologists are working hard to restore the population of red signal sea cucumbers. These poor creatures have been fished out of local waters, but specialists are determined to give them a fighting chance. They're also exploring how sea cucumbers can fit into seafood cultivation. Their lab is like a sea cucumber daycare, carefully nurturing the next generation of these wiggly wonders. And let's not forget about Canada. Research scientists are focusing on the giant red sea cucumber. These magnificent creatures can grow up to 20 inches long and are perfect for co-cultivation with other species. They're even developing special containment systems that will make it easier to keep sea cucumbers where they're needed the most. Okay, speaking of amazing sea creatures, what about a fish that can fly? Heard that right, we're about to stumble upon a land where fins meet flying, and the ocean becomes a runway for these airborne acrobats. Prepare to be fantastically entertained. Nah, I didn't write that one. So picture this, you're lounging by the warm ocean waters, minding your own business, when suddenly you see a fish soaring through the air like a torpedo. That's right, they are real, and they got some serious style. With their sleek bodies and pectoral fins that resemble wings, they're the high flyers of the sea. Now, you might be wondering, why would a fish take to the skies? Well, it turns out these magnificent creatures have developed this nifty gliding ability as a sneaky trick to escape from their underwater foes. And boy, do they have plenty of enemies. Those guys are all on the lookout for a tasty flying fish snack. When it comes to their diet, these avian fishes are quite the foodies. They chow down on a variety of treats, including the ever-popular plankton. Who knew tiny floating organisms could be so delicious? Now let's take a closer look at the flying fish family album. We've got a whopping 40 known species strutting their stuff in the sky. And here's a fun fact. All of them have tails that are forked in an uneven manner, with the lower lobe being longer than the upper one. It's like the fishy version of a funky hairstyle. And there's more. Some of these weird flyers even have supersized pelvic fins, giving them the appearance of having 4 wings. Can you imagine the envy in the fish community when they see these trendsetters gliding by? Okay, now let's get to the nitty-gritty of their airborne adventures. The flying fish takeoff is a sight to behold. First, they gather some serious speed underwater, reaching a zippy 37 miles per hour. That's faster than some highway speed limits. Then, like a rocket ready for blastoff, they angle themselves upward and break the ocean surface, ready to take flight. But they don't stop there. These thrill seekers can reach heights of over 4 feet in the air. Can you imagine the view from up there? They glide through the sky, covering long distances. That's like the fishy equivalent of a marathon. And here's the best part. When they approach the water again, they can flap their tails and continue their flight without fully returning to the depths. These fishy flyers are also all about the nightlife. Just like partygoers flock to a glittering disco ball, flying fish are attracted to light. Crafty fishermen take advantage of this by setting up canoes with just the right amount of water to keep the fish comfy but prevent them from escaping. Then they add a luring light to the scene, and before you know it, flying fish are caught left and right, supplying a bountiful catch for those lucky fishermen. Don't worry though, these flying fish aren't on the endangered species list. Not yet, at least. The next time you find yourself by the ocean, keep an eye out for these marvelous creatures. You never know when you'll see a flying fish extravaganza. Our next adventure takes us into the quirky world of underwater romance. Picture this. A scene that looks like someone doing the tango with their lunch. Wait, what? No, it's not a throwing up contest, I promise. We're diving headfirst into the jaw-dropping, pun intended, mating ritual of the jawfish. These curious creatures call the coral reefs of the Caribbean Sea and the Western Atlantic home. And boy, do they know how to make a spectacle of themselves. Forget about pickup lines or fancy gestures. These jawfish rely on their unique jaw-based moves to pursue their potential partners. It's like a dance-off, but with their mouths. Not only are these fishy fellas skilled in the art of sand scooping, but they also double as diligent parents. Talk about alliteration. Talk about multitasking. The males take their parental duties to the next level by carrying the precious eggs in their giant mouths until they're ready to hatch. It's like they have their own aquatic daycare center going on. When they're not busy nurturing their offspring, these jawfish transform their mouths into fighting tools. That's right, it's time for the Jawfish Fighting Championship. They go head-to-head, or rather mouth-to-mouth, in epic battles of mouth strength and agility. You know the old saying, put your money where your mouth is? Well, these jawfish take it to a whole new level. Whether it's for romance, parroting, or friendly competition, these jawfish show us that sometimes actions do really speak louder than words. They may look like they're having a bad seafood experience, but rest assured, it's just their unique way of finding love